IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Trev is on a little mini vacation, so I am joined today by my guy Sean Davis, and boy, do we have some fun topics for y'all today. We were, Sean, going to just come in here today and do like a normal state of the program breakdown of the defensive tackles, and we are still going to do that, but what you and I wanted to discuss today first was we wanted to react to and comment on the proposal from the AFCA, which is the American Football Coaches Association, an organization that I used to be a part of and used to attend their meetings, and an organization that I respect and I like the role they have. But they've come out and proposed really a 4-tiered, changes to college football, and we wanted to talk about that to begin the show. And then after we're done with that, we'll dive into our 3-point breakdown with state of the program. We'll talk about, what we saw this spring and some of the things we learned. And we'll dive into, what we need to see moving forward. And then, of course, we'll wrap things up with some recruiting. And I thought, Sean, this is the perfect show for you to be on, since so much of the recruiting conversation with the defensive tackle room is a bunch of kids that are right down the street from where you live, or at least in the same city. I shouldn't say right down the street, but in the same city from where you're from, young men that you've had a chance to talk to and get to know. So first of all, Sean, I see you got your IB Performance shirt in the mail. Looking good, my friend.
I did.
How are you today?
I'm feeling great, ready to talk about all of the great topics we have. Shout out to IB Nation. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend celebrating all the beautiful women in our life that are mothers, and let's get it done.
Yes, that we will. My mother, obviously, happy Mother's Day to my mom. I know your mom. I know your wife is also a mother. So happy Mother's Day to Tiff, and happy Mother's Day to the members of our board. We have plenty of ladies that are in the show that are our moms. So we appreciate y'all. Happy Mother's Day to y'all as well. Sean, let's kick things off with part one of our show today, which is we want to go into and talk about the proposal from the AFCA, American Football Coaches Association, and they had a 4-step proposal. There's some things about this we like, some things that we really don't like, and we don't think they're being honest about the reasons why. And then some things that, like, I don't mind this, but it has to include this, and here's where they missed the boat. So let's discuss this. So first of all, the proposal, and then I'm going to just sum it up this way. They want to expand the playoffs to 24 teams. That's part of it. That would then include getting rid of the conference championship games, reducing the open weeks during the season from 2 to 1, so the bye weeks. They would still carve out a window for Army-Navy, but there's going to be other games played that day, which means you're not carving out a window. It just means you're not scheduling another game all at the same time, which is nonsense. And then they want to mandate that there be only 6 days in between games. So essentially, they want a game on Saturday, next game's on Saturday, next game's on Saturday until the season's over with. So let's get into some of it, Sean, and let's talk specifically about some of these things, and then we'll dive more into the motivations at the end, because they explain what their motivations are. Some of them I buy, some of them I don't. So let's first begin. We'll talk about the 2014 playoff at the end. To begin, no conference championship game, I fully support. I think in a 12-team playoff, there's no longer a need for the conference championship game. I mean, in the last 2 years, have we seen a team that lost in the conference championship game get knocked out of the playoffs of the Power 4 teams? We have not. Mm-hmm. The losers were either already out or were already in. So, like, for example, we saw SMU lost in the ACC championship game 2 years ago. They stayed in the top 12. They made the playoffs. You look at the SEC championship same year, Texas, Georgia, they both made it. The Big 12 championship, Iowa State and Arizona State, neither of them were in the top 12 when the game was played. So the winner was going to get in, the loser was going to stay at home. That was the reality of it. And in the Big 10, Oregon and Penn State both made it in. And neither of them really moved in the ranking. So it's not even like they got dropped out. They barely even moved. The only team that really moved at all was SMU. This season, Alabama gets destroyed by Georgia and doesn't drop in the rankings at all. stays right where they are. And they basically told us this game meant nothing. Georgia wins it. They're both in. Big 12 championship game. BYU needs to win to get in. They don't. Texas Tech wins. So BYU is already out. They didn't drop out because of the loss. ACC, neither team was in it. Neither team got in. So it was very useless for that one. Yeah. And the Big we said the Big 12, Big 10, Indiana and Ohio State both got in. And if anything, the only outcome of that was they beat each other up a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's, other than just making money for the conferences, the conference championship games serve no purpose, because the teams that play in it that are already ranked in the top 10 or 11 are going to stay in the top 10 or 11 based on what we've seen the first 2 years. And the committee laid out very clearly with Alabama this year, it doesn't matter how bad they get beat, how bad they look, they're not moving. They're not going to get in, and we're going to drop Notre Dame because of something that happened in week 1 that we already knew about for the last month, and not pretend like Alabama also didn't lose that weekend to a far worse team. So the committee by themselves basically said the conference championship games are meaningless. So now it's up to the coaches and the administrators to now to fight for that. Say, hey, listen, these games don't mean anything. If anything, it hurts us, because we run the risk of losing guys. We run the risk of, just more film of the other team to play. We get rusty, teams are getting more time off, whatever you want to justify. Might have a big injury. Georgia fans can sit there and say they've sat there and said, well, we'd have beat Notre Dame if we had Carson Beck. Well, when did Carson Beck get hurt? In a meaningless conference championship game. You were both going to be in the playoffs anyway. And now I don't agree that game that he would have mattered, but the point is, the fact that he did get hurt that game gives them the ability to make that argument. He wouldn't have got hurt if it wasn't for that game. So I think that I know I'm a supporter, Sean, of the notion of getting rid of conference championship games. There's just no need for them anymore.
Yeah, I think they've served their purpose. I think they definitely pushed the game ahead from a economic standpoint and from a competitive standpoint. It also pushed the SEC out in front of a lot of people across the college football landscape. I think it gave them something to go ahead and up the ante in recruiting as well. I mean, they already have a geographical advantage when it comes to recruiting, and then the championship game, and then the revenue that came with that, and of course the backdoor revenue that they were sharing with those athletes. That kind of allowed them to have an advantageous situation for decades down south. Now the tables have, or the pendulum has swung back the other way in a sense. And now they no longer have that competitive advantage as far as economics and roster building. And so now, it goes to, it's very interesting that the AFCA now wants to talk about this situation, because I wonder if this push from Craig Bowl is coming from. It's very interesting because we've heard Kirby talk about and mention a lot recently that, there's a lot of angst amongst the SEC coaches when they do have meetings about how things are. So I just wonder where the push is coming from in the AFCA. Like, is it coming more from those coaches in the SEC? I mean, the Big Ten has won 3 consecutive national championships. I would love to think that when you see teams like Rutgers getting 78.5 point million, that those coaches are pretty okay with the current situation, and that, the Big Ten pretty much has the leverage, which they were once aligned with the SEC and a lot of these things. And now all of a sudden they've kind of stepped out in front, detached themselves from the SEC, recognizing that, we kind of have the leverage right now from a revenue standpoint, from a conference standpoint, competitive standpoint, and winning national championships. So it's just very interesting just thinking about those things that you mentioned and who's really pushing for these changes and where is it coming from. And it's just very interesting that we have heard Kirby Smart echoing some of these same things in some of his recent appearances on podcasts and other platforms. So I'm with you. Like I said before, conference championship did its thing, served its purpose. You can find another way to go ahead and supplement that or give the same vibe. And I think they have a plan for that. More access is what Craig Bowl talked about from the coach's standpoint.
Yeah.
And
Well, before we go to the 2014 playoff, let me just kind of work through this real quick because I want to spend some serious time on that one, Sean, because I think that's the driver of a lot of this. So let me just work through these other couple things first, because you and I agree the conference championships have run their course. There was a time when they made sense financially. There were a time when they made sense to say, hey, we do need to determine who the best team in the SEC is, because Georgia plays the East and Bama played the West, but they don't play each other. And, there's some discrepancy of, Georgia has a better record, but Bama had to go through a much tougher gauntlet. So let's like the scene from the first of the new Godzilla movies, let them fight, let's see who it is. And sometimes Georgia got the better of Bama, and sometimes Bama got the better of Georgia. Actually, most of the time, Bama got the better of Georgia in those instances. Actually, I think Bama got the better of Georgia in all of the SEC title games, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
So when you look at it, Sean, I think there's no need for them now. If they're all going to be in the playoffs anyway, there's no need for them to have it. It doesn't matter. And the conference championship games push back the calendar, because part of this thing that we'll get into is they talk about the calendar. Well, this is a fix. Second thing they want to do is they want to reduce the open weeks in the season from 2 weeks. You get 2 byes to 1. I don't have a problem with that in theory, but here's where I have a problem with it. And I think these two things go together. And if you fix this one, then you fix the other one. They said they want to not have a bye between the end of the regular season and the playoffs, with the goal being essentially they want to be able to play the championship game essentially the first week of the year. So you'd have in this 2014 playoffs, you'd have the 9 versus 24, the 9 through 24, the top 8 teams would get a bye. And so then you'd get into the second Saturday of December, the 12th, and that would essentially be a 16-team playoff. So they want to waste our time with these 8 games so we can get into a 16-team playoff, and then essentially you have 4 weeks. So then you'd be the 19th, the 26th, the 12th, the 19th, the 26th, and then you'd have the championship game that first Saturday of December. A couple things with that, Sean. I think we need to get away from this arbitrary desire to end the season on New Year's. First of all, it's just not practical. You don't want to move the season up too much, because you do want to have the season starting when people are on campus for the most part. And I understand the desire to end the season much sooner, because there's got to be a happy medium between we need to end on New Year's basically, or we're going until almost February. We got to find a happy medium. But this idea that you're going to have college student athletes, which means teams are going to have 17, 18, and 19-year-olds playing college football. Now, if a team is, let's say a team that's a 9 seed, and we just saw Miami last year's the 10 seed. We'll use Miami because they're the only non-top 8 team that's made it to the championship game. So now for that 10 seed Miami to go on a run, they have to play 12 games in 13 weeks, then go right into the postseason. After all conference play, go right into the postseason and play 5 more weeks. So you're now going to have to play 17 games in 18 weeks. That is stupid. That is absolutely stupid to be asking college athletes to do that. So here's the thing. You got one of two things you can do. You can give them 2 byes during the regular season and keep that. Or, and this is where I think the Army-Navy thing comes into play, finish the season the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I actually support that, Sean. That's when college football's regular season should end. Then first Saturday of December is Army-Navy. And Saturday after the Sunday after Thanksgiving, we announce who's in the playoffs. We know who it's going to be, and then have a bye for between that and the first round. Now, in their proposal, that gets you into the second week of January. So the way it would work, Sean, is the first batch of games, so 9 through 24, would play Saturday the 12th. Then the round of 16 would begin on the 19th. The round of 8 would be on the 26th. Then that first Saturday of January, which this year is going to be January 2nd, would be the semifinals, and then you'd have January 9th would be the championship game. That is perfectly reasonable time to start the playoffs. But if you're dead set on what they want, which is end sooner but expand the playoffs, fine. Then go to 16 teams, have a bye between the first two games, or the first round games, and then you play the round of 16 on the 12th, the round of 8 on the 19th. You play the round of the semifinals on the 26th, and you play the championship game that first Saturday of January. So if you really want to end it sooner, then you can miss me with the 2014 playoff stuff. You don't get to say we want the season to end sooner, but we want 5 rounds of playoff games. And oh, by the way, these young student athletes that we say we care about, and they can only have 6, the other final proposal is only 6 days in between games, which means rapid fire, bam, 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 bam. The 5 rounds wouldn't be as bad on them if there was like 9, 10, 11 days in between games, Sean, because there'd be time for these young people to rest. So you sit there and tell us that this proposal's about the student athletes, but then you're going to tell us we're going to give them a more rigorous regular season than the National Football League? That's what let's look out for the players are. Now, granted, only 2 teams fall victim to this. It's just the teams that play in the title game. And then 2 other teams have to play 16 games. But they're playing those 16 games in 17 weeks, Sean. That's absurd. You don't get to tell us that this is about the student athletes and lie to us, because it's not about the student athletes. There's one thing they said that's pro-student athlete, and I actually agree with this. They said the season needs to get started sooner for players that are going to be jumping into the portal. I agree with that. They need more time. So if we do the way that I think you and I would do the season, they're getting done the 8th. Everybody except the 2 teams playing for the championships is in it from the beginning of the portal till it closes, that 2-week window. And most players that are, those 2 teams, they get the extension, right? They'll have a little bit more time. So that's I guess, as we kind of circle back to the 24, we'll talk about the practicality of the 24 in a second, Sean, but I know this is where you wanted to go, and this is where I want to go, and this is where we'll spend our time. You can't tell us that this is student-athlete driven and then come up with a proposal that's going to mandate at least 2 teams play 17 games in 18 weeks with 1 bye. And some teams are going to have to get a bye early in the season. That's just how it works, unless you're going to have all of college football the week off, like in middle of October. Somebody's then going to have to play like 13, 14 straight games without any break, while coaches are also advocating for scholarship and roster limits. You guys are the same ones that want to go from 125 roster limits to 105. So you're going to take 20 less players away, and now you want them to play 17 games in 18 weeks? No. You can't tell me you're doing this for the players when that's your proposal, because that undermines everything else that you're going to say as somehow looking out for the student athletes.
And you made all great points. And I just want to piggyback on that and say, look, and we're just speaking this coming from the AFCA and their suggestion. Like you said, we need to stop hiding. This is something that I actually applaud college basketball for. They don't hide behind the student athlete. They let you know we're in cahoots with the NBA, with our talented players. They're going to be here for half a semester. They're not going to classes after the tournament. They're getting prepared to go to the NBA. You know this, right? And it's more of them accepting and putting out there that this is becoming more of a professional model. You see the insertion. My Illini benefited from going over and grabbing European players that had played professionally and bringing them over. So they have embraced what college football needs to embrace. It's just to go ahead and say times have changed, right? We do have some of our traditions, but because of how things have changed, how the economy has changed around college football, we need to accept more of a pro model and integrate it into college football instead of selling this, student athlete thing to the masses, because we know that's not the case. And when you present things, trying to present it along those lines, it's not easily digested by fans. So I just really think what you said was perfect. I'm irritated at the fact that they're messing with Army Navy. I'm just irritated with that. Leave them alone.
Yeah.
That's their Saturday. It should forever be their Saturday, right? Just like this is why we were upset with the way USC was moving in terms of wanting to play week 0 and the first week. Like, look, the tradition is the tradition. You know that that first Saturday in November is huge. You know that last Saturday in November is huge when it comes to traditional games. Those things are set in stone. And just let it be. Now, if you want to change everything around it, that goes ahead and pushes the game forward, makes the game better, brings more revenue into the game, brings more fans into the game, you still don't want to steal the regular season and the importance of the regular season from the fans. All right. If you get rid of the championship weekends, you're not doing that. Because now you still have something to fight for in terms of getting into the college football playoff. The regular season games matter, right? This is something very interesting. And this is because it's coming from the AFCA. These are the coaches of America, right? This is something else that college football, if you want to expand, because this talk is coming up pretty much college women's and men's basketball, they're expanding to 76.
Which is also stupid,
right?
By the way.
Which is stupid. Yeah. But let me tell you one thing that the coaches in college basketball do that the coaches in college football won't do. They just made an announcement that UConn and Michigan are playing at TD Waterhouse. UConn made another announcement that they're playing Illinois again next year. Coaches in college, Tom Izzo plays Kansas, Duke every year.
He has notoriously done that. He's notoriously said, hey, we're going to play out of conference. We know we're going to lose games because it's going to help us get ready for Big Ten play and then get us ready to make a run in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
Right.
I want to suggest to the coaches of college football, grow or get some kahunas.
Right.
If you want to expand, have the courage to step out of conference early before you get into conference play and play some big time opponents, just like these college basketball coaches.
You don't get to cancel games out of conference and then cry about we need more teams.
Absolutely.
No.
And then you don't get to cancel home 100%. And homes for one game at a neutral site. No.
Right. Now, let me say one thing. I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
In theory, you and I spot on agreement. I'm just not going to pick on Florida State and Georgia in this instance because they both already have a legit Power 5 opponent that they play every year. So I give them a bit of a pass because with those conferences going to 9 conference games, they're guaranteed 10 Power 4 games every year. Well, I got to watch Penn State and Indiana play 9, and then part of that 9 is Rutgers and Northwestern and teams like that. And then they play, nobody else in the season. Like I have a little bit more sympathy for Georgia and Florida State than I do the others. But your point stands outside of, that unique exception because those two teams happen to do this. By and large, I'm spot on with you on that. I want to go back to this whole thing too about the coaches because we have put a lot of blame on presidents and TV execs and things like that. These are the people that are supposed to be the stewards of the game. These are the people who, by and large, we all are hoping and wishing and praying are going to step up and start actually defending, what's best for these young people. Now, of course, you need to defend what's best for yourself. But to have someone come to us and just lie right to our face and say, doing this because we think this is best for the student athletes, it's very frustrating to read that when I see these different quotes from Craig Bowl about we're trying to get in line and we're trying to look out for the student athletes and all that stuff. Nuh-uh. You can miss me with that. And it's the students that are now saying, it's the coaches that are now saying, hey, we want to have a scenario where we're going to play 17 games in 18 weeks. And we're going to let Army Navy have their carve out. But by the way, we're going to play 3 playoff games or 4 playoff games that day, which means no one's going to then care about Army Navy. The whole spectacle of Army Navy is they get their own weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the coaches that are doing the biggest, in my opinion, push to destroy the regular season in the tradition of the sport. If Lincoln Riley was not making a push to get rid of the Notre Dame USC game, then Notre Dame and USC would still be playing. Now, Jen Cohen was the one that got it done, but she's got it done at the behest of her head football coach. Yeah. Let's be real about that. It's coaches that want to get out of these games, not ADs and not presidents, because the games that they're getting out of are going to make them more money than the games they're going into. It's the coaches that are asking for this. It's the coaches that are trying to soften their schedule so they get more wins, so they can get into the playoffs. And is it really because they get a chance to make a run? I got Will Stein, this is great. We should definitely do this. Will Stein doesn't think he's going to be able to get into the playoffs and make a run. Will Stein just wants to be able to go and say, hey, I made the playoffs. Look at me. Might be able to pull off a first-round win. Look at me. And that's my big issue with this, Sean, is you guys are trying to tell us that we're looking out for the student athletes, and then you're going to tell us, okay, we're going to get rid of no conference championship games, but we're going to then play football that weekend in a 9 to 24 teams. The 9 to 24 ranked teams are going to play that weekend, which begins a run of 5 games. So if a team from that weekend makes it to the championship game, which Miami did last year, and I believe Notre Dame also would have had a chance to do had they got in last year. So there were 2 teams that were ranked around 10, at least 9 to 24 that could have made a run. They've got to play 5 games. On top of nobody has a bye in week 13. Mm-mm. You know what I mean? So you're now going to say play 17 games in 18 weeks. We're gonna go right into the playoffs. Travel. And after the first round, you're on the road the next month, Sean. So it's not even like you're home and you now have to, if you make that run, you've got to, and if you're let's be honest, seeds 17 to 24 aren't going on 5-game runs. So at least those teams playing the first round that make the run, Notre Dame would have been at home. Miami would have been at home in this format, right? BYU would have been at home. Texas would have been at home. It's another team that people say could have made a run. At least they only have to go on the road for 4 weeks. Which is utter nonsense. Whereas in a 16-team playoff, the high seeds get the first-round buys, and then they only got to go on the road for 3 weeks. So you can miss me with the whole, we're doing this for the players. Just be honest. Hey, guys, this is good for us. It's a good job security for us to be able to say we're going to get in, which it doesn't. That's where these agents and coaches are stupid. They can negotiate, well, if I get in the playoffs, I get a bonus. Bro, your job isn't safer because here's what's going to happen. You're going to get into the playoff, Kentucky, as the 24 seed, and the 9 seed is going to beat the ever-living dog snot out of you, and your coach and your ADs will be like, man, you went to the playoffs and you got beat by 30. Who cares? Hey, but I got my bonus. Good. Take your bonus and good luck at your next job because you're not going to be the coach here for much longer. So like you're going to do that instead of maybe going and winning a bowl. Bowl games don't matter. Yeah, but this doesn't matter either. There's no 24 seed that's going to go on a run and beat people. Come on, give me a break. Yeah. You guys are doing this for yourselves. At least be honest about it. Hey, this helps us. Well, players want to be able to get in the portal. No, you want to know who's going to be in the portal right away, and you want to be able to go recruit your next group of players. This isn't about the players because there's so much in here, Sean, that flat out says this is not player driven. That makes me say all the stuff you're saying is player driven is bullcrap because of all this. You can't tell me anything you say is, well, this is best for the players, and then say we're going to come up with a proposal that asks them to play 17 games in 18 weeks. And oh, by the way, Army Navy, if you guys make the playoffs, sorry. You can't play your game. Because let's be real. There's been years recently where in a 2014 playoff, Army or Navy would probably be in the playoff. Yeah. But hey, so sorry, you can't play because you got to play. You got to pick between the Army Navy game or a first round playoff game.
With Craig Bowl pointing out what he feels like would be beneficial based upon these suggestions, it kind of contradicts recent history, especially when he talks about the need to not have as long of a bye or a lot of time in between games. Well, Indiana looked pretty okay after their bye coming out. They looked like they were prepared. Of course, the year before, Ohio State was one of those teams that immediately got to play, and it benefited them, right? But you go back, before the expansion, Michigan won a championship. They had a long layoff before they played the semifinal game. So recent history says that it could matter depending upon the team and whether or not your coaches have you prepared or whether or not you have the players. I can see both sides to it.
Right.
And as I said before, I like limiting that amount of time in between.
Agreed.
I don't like people being off 20-something days. No one wants that.
Especially in the current format where the teams that win their leagues basically get penalized.
Yeah.
Because 7 of the 8 teams that got first round buys got beat. The only team that won was a team that played another team who had zero business being in the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
We don't know how it would have gone for Indiana if they played Miami or Notre Dame in their first game or Texas in their first game instead of a team that had no business being in the playoffs. You know what I mean? So now they beat Miami, but would they have beat Miami if Miami was coming off their hard-fought road win over Oklahoma? Let's just say Miami was the 9 seed like they should have been, because if Bama was dropped out, Miami goes up to 9, Notre Dame goes up to 10. Now all of a sudden they've got to play Miami. Well, they beat Miami at the end, barely. But that was when they got in their groove. Would they have been able to do that coming off of a rusty, month off? We don't know the answer to that. But the point is, Sean, is go ahead, Bob.
No, what else is interesting? Just talking about this from a coach's perspective, which just doesn't seem to add up all the way. Like you say, I think Marcus Freeman is a perfect case study. There's benefits to both. There's benefits to being the program and the coaching staff that makes a run all the way to the national championship game and is a little bit behind when it comes to the transfer portal and getting out there during the contact period, right? And then on the flip side, he himself said this is a different offseason because, man, I had time that I didn't have the previous season, not only to prepare for the portal and recruiting, but to look at my team and to figure out what needs to be improved within the program. But if you ask Marcus Freeman which of those options he would prefer, he will always tell you, I would give me the run to the national championship and I'll deal with the calendar in the aftermath.
Right.
So
I'm very curious, Sean, how it's going to go for Miami and Indiana this offseason. Like, are they able to learn from the mistakes that Ohio State and Notre Dame made? We said, what do you mean Ohio State made mistakes? Well, I think Ohio State's entire game plan during the season was to preserve their energy. I mean, they talked about this, like, we're trying to build for the playoffs. Well, then they got to the postseason and it didn't work out for them. This whole we're doing this to prepare ourselves for playoffs ended up not preparing them because they scored a combined 23 points in the 2 playoff postseason games. And then, of course, we know how Notre Dame kind of came out of the season looking pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, okay, then fine. Let's end the season sooner. You and I are both advocates for ending the season sooner. There is a pathway, but you can't sit there and say we want to end the season sooner, but yet we want to stuff a 2014 playoff down your throat and then try to pretend like this is rational, reasonable in any way, shape, form, or fashion is going to be good for the players. It's not good for the players. Like I said, Sean, here's the matchups that we would see in round 1. I'm just going to go off of last year's final college football playoff rankings. Okay, so here's what the first round playoff games would have been. Okay, so we would have had number 9 Alabama against number 24 James Madison, number 10 Miami against number 23 Iowa, number 11 Notre Dame against number 22 Georgia Tech, number 12 BYU against number 21 Houston, number 13 Texas against number 20 Tulane, number 14 Vanderbilt against number 19 Virginia, number 15 Utah against number 18 Michigan, and number 16 USC against number 17 Arizona. Name me one game in that group that anybody gives a crap about outside of fans of that team. There isn't one. And the matchups the year before wouldn't have been a whole lot better, unless you were just like you had a hankering for that Boise State versus UNLV three-peat in the first round of the playoffs, because that's exactly what would have got 9 Boise State against number 24 UNLV. Maybe you were really excited about that SMU versus Colorado game, or that Bama versus Army game, or that Arizona State versus Syracuse game, or that Miami versus Illinois game, or that Ole Miss versus Missouri game, or that South Carolina versus Iowa State game, or that vaunted Clemson BYU matchup in the first round. So, no, I don't want to see that the first Saturday of December. What I want to see the first Saturday of December is, look, guys, I'm with you. If you want to just have the regular season be just one bye week, totally fine with that. But give them all a bye week during the first Saturday of December. And that is nothing but Army versus Navy.
Yeah.
That's it. We'll expand, but we're going to go to a more reasonable 16-team playoff. And it's 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15. Everybody plays in that first weekend. Okay? And then basically the way you make it is you have your teams that are basically just going to play Friday games for the rest of the way until the championship game. And then the teams are going to play, Saturday games. So the way you would do it is whoever, like the 1 versus 16, that bracket, so they'd play 4. They're going to be on Friday from a scheduling. And then the teams that would play, in each round in the 2 seed would then play on Saturdays or vice versa. So that way you don't have these weird, okay, we played on a Saturday one week, got to play on a Friday the next. If you're dead set on having 6 days in between, okay, which I'm okay with. But basically what you could do at that point in time, Sean, is you have the bye week, then you have the round of 16 on the 12th. You have the round, so the weekend of the 12th. You have the round of 8 on the 19th. Then you'd have the semifinals, the weekend, the Saturday after Christmas. And then your championship game is on January 2nd. What I would suggest doing, and I think this would actually make a lot of sense, is essentially you go first, the round of 16 is on the 12th. So this year, this is how this would go. Round of 16 is on the 12th. Round of 8 is on the 9th. So then you get your semifinals. Give some time in between that. Play that on January 1st. Right? So you have a break in between the quarters and the semis. And then on January 1st, you play the semis. And then a week later, you play the championship game. So we're giving rest periods. We're not now forcing, hey, Marcus Freeman, I hate to break it to you. You and Kirby Smart and Ryan Day and Kurt Signetti, you guys are going to kind of be in the Elite Eight every year. So guess what? You're just not going to be spending Christmas at home with your family like ever. Unless you guys lose. So you're having great New Year's Eve. We're keeping that tradition. You've got those 2 bowl games. You can have some other bowl games earlier in the day, and then 3:30 you have one semifinal game. 8 o'clock you have the second semifinal game, and then a week later if they want to have it on a Monday still, and depends on when January 1st is, but you have 7 to 10 days of between the championship game, and so now we've spread it out, but the spread out is not more than like a week and a half, and it's being done at the end of the season. Where 2 things, you have more time to rest, so you're getting the best version of the 2 teams that are playing, and 2, there is time for marketing, because that is part of the game, Sean. You and I are not people that say, we don't care about TV and marketing. Yes, we do, because that's part of what makes the game great, but we don't need 2 whole weeks off between every round, or 10, 9, 10, 11, 12 games before every round. There's very easy ways to do this, where you are, in fact, shortening the season significantly, and also making sure that you're not wearing down a bunch of teenagers. Well, Indiana last year, Indiana still had a bunch of teenagers on their football team. And there will be years where teams are going to have a lot of 18, 19-year-olds, especially with all these kids reclassifying. You're just making college football even younger with all these kids that are reclassifying. So there's ways to accomplish the things that they say they care about But the minute they start talking about a 2014 playoff, then you've lost me because you don't care about it. You can't tell me that you care about the players when you've just proposed a 5-round playoff game. I have people say, well, the Division III tournament used to be bigger than that. Yeah, we only played 10 regular season games. So Mount Union would win 5 games in the postseason, and they'd be 15-0. And with all due respect, D3 football doesn't have the same wear and tear on your body. There's guards Drake Bowen size at the levels I coached at. Let's be real about that. Now, there's big guys too. I'm not going to act like all of our guys were just these little tiny guys, but like that's the reality of it. Yeah. The best cornerback I ever coached at the Division III level is a kid named Rob Rodriguez. He was 5'6", $155. That's why he was at the D3 level instead of the Division I level, and he got to try out with the gym. There's very good talent. I don't mean to disparage the level that I played at and coached at, but the reality is when a 205-pound linebacker bangs into you, it's a whole lot different than when a guy like Drake Bowen or Kingston Villiamas or Mad Framo or Manti Te'o or Jalen Smith pounds into you. It's a different animal. So that's where they lose me. You guys are trying to pretend like this is player driven, but it's not. This is you guys trying to say, do something that's best for you. So you can say, hey, I made the playoff. Look at my clause. I get this guaranteed thing in my contract. Because first thing agents are going to start doing is getting these clauses into their contracts that protect their guys if they make the playoffs. That's what's a big part of it, number one. And number two, they then want to speed things up, not so that the players can jump in the portal. Stop trying to pretend like you're being like these just altruistic people. No, you want to have more time if you go on a run of being able to recruit as much as you can in the portal. This is about you. Stop hiding behind the players and be real about it. This is about you. And that's why this proposal to me is just, it doesn't pass the smell test at all, Sean. It absolutely stinks. And this 2014 push with no time in between the regular season and the postseason, and you want to get rid of the extra bye during the regular season, reeks of, well, we don't actually have to play. So we can coach every week. I don't get tired. I don't get sore. I don't have injuries to bounce back from that keeps me from coaching.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we'll go right away. But you're not looking out for your players. No, you're not. Yeah. You can say you are, but you're not. When you're proposing that my team, if to win a championship, my team's going to have to play 17 games in 18 weeks, you are not telling me you're doing right by your players. You're not. Stop lying to us.
And let's be honest. Like you said, you've been in that room, so you could probably get a little bit more insight being part of the organization. But we recently heard Kirby Smart say, I'm not really in support of 24, and I'm really not in support of 16, but I think we should expand. Well, the only thing left is 14. And we know why he wants 14, because that would eliminate the bye for his team. And like you said, it will be the least amount of expansion that would also get rid of the championship game, which is something he's probably in favor of as well. So, but if Kirby's in that room, or let's say Ryan Day is in the room with the rest of the Big Ten coaches or the SEC coaches, Ryan Day and Kirby Smart don't agree with their complaints. They're just sitting there. Why? Because they're the big dogs. They're the big dogs. There might be some things they agree, theoretically. I agree. Theoretically, we should expand. 16, no. 24, no. Like, you guys can't make a run. You're not winning a national championship. There are some teams that can get hot. There is a 10 seed that can get hot. There's an 11 seed or 12 seed that can get hot. But no, I don't agree with that. Right. So theoretically, yes, we agree. But the rest of the complaints, the thing is, the minority in this are the Dan Lannings, the Ryan Days, the Marcus Freemans, the big time college. They're the minorities, and everyone else is the majority that's complaining because they're mediocre programs, or they're just a step below, and they're right on the fringe, and they got to fight it out every year to see if they get in. I don't think Kirby Smart worries about getting into the playoff every year.
No,
I just don't.
No.
Maybe he worries about winning it. Well, no, I don't even know if he worries about winning the SEC at this point, because they continue to do it. But that, for me, just in that particular organization, the way it plays out, I think there's solidarity on a few things, but I don't think there's solidarity, especially those guys at the top of the totem pole. I don't think they see it the way the majority of the guys that are part of the organization see it.
There's
and
some
that for me is very
definite
interesting
pushback from the coaches on the 2014 playoff. And honestly, it is a lot of those guys who know I'll never have a team that can get into a 12-team playoff and rarely can get into a 16-team playoff.
Yeah.
Rarely is going to happen.
Yeah.
So
and
it's just,
as far
it's just
as tradition, I just want to throw this in there. As far as tradition, I just think at some point, you have to recognize on both sides, people that want to hold on to tradition, hold on to the student app. I know why that's important to you, especially if you're a fan of a school like Notre Dame. I totally get it. But there's a point of realism that you have to come to say times have changed. Things are different. That vision of the past is fading away if it hasn't already completely evaporated. And that's just the way to work. And it doesn't mean everything is going to hell. It just means we have to find a way to still honor tradition.
Exactly.
And be able to intertwine it. Yes. Yes. And I think
the game evolves. I mean, tradition is Newt Rockne. How many times did Newt Rockne win 10 games in Notre Dame, Sean? Greatest coach at Notre Dame, greatest win percentage in the history of the sport. Newt Rockne, still number one in all-time win percentage. You know how many times he won 10 or more games at Notre Dame in his tenure? Three times. Three times.
Was it three? Okay.
21, 24, and 30. And in the 24, they got to 10 because they played in the Rose Bowl. Why? Because they only played like between 8 to 10 games. His first year as a coach, they played 6, and then 9, 9, 11, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 10. So clearly the tradition wasn't a 12-team regular season. It evolved. Yeah. And that's okay. It evolved. The conference championship games was a thing that was a part of tradition, and it has to evolve because you're going to because you want to have a conference championship game, then go back to 11 games.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago. 2005, Notre Dame only played 11 games, and it's not because his game got canceled because of, we've had games canceled for different things over the years, whether it was COVID or 2001. We obviously had some games canceled after 9/11 happened and things like that. I mean, but like it's not because of that. It's because that's just what they played that year. So, but like those things evolve. What shouldn't evolve is Ohio State and Michigan being on the Saturday after Thanksgiving every year. Notre Dame and USC playing every year, Army, Navy getting their own season. I don't think the old bowl system is such that you've just got to hang on to it. Like I like it. I respect it. The problem isn't that the bowl system went away from being what it was. It's the way that it went away. The way that you just told us that these games don't matter. The way that you guys who host the games told us that we shouldn't pay attention to this stuff. So to me, it's like the games can matter. The bowl games can matter. Bowl games can be part of it, but they don't have to be like they were 60 years ago. There's ways you can do that. I've proposed how you could do that. But if that's not what you guys want to do, then it's fine. So the game has to evolve and traditions have to evolve, but they don't need to be eliminated. And that's the thing that bothers me, right? Conferences evolve. The SEC wasn't the same 8 teams for 50 years. Georgia Tech used to be in the SEC. Sewanee used to be in the SEC. I mean, I get those things change. I understand that. And I'm not against conference realignment. I'm against conference realignment for the reasons that they did it, because by doing so, you then basically say, well, we've got to get rid of all these traditional things.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem with this whole argument. And I know there's some people in the chat just trying to be contrarian just for the sake of being contrarian. But the reality is a 24-team playoff means nothing in college football. And there's a pushback. I've seen this on online. Well, 14 of the 32 NFL teams make the playoff, and it's this percentage of teams, and only this percentage of teams in college football make it. Who's the equivalent of Kennesaw State in the NFL? Who's the equivalent of Troy in the NFL? Who's the equivalent of Bowling Green in the NFL? Who's the equivalent of San Jose State in the NFL? It's a stupid argument to make because in the NFL, first of all, teams are constructed differently. And because you can there's a draft instead of you recruit players to your team. There's a salary cap that makes things balanced. There's all these things that say there's always more parity in the NFL. A team that finishes 32nd can have 2 good off seasons and go win a championship. The team that finishes 135th isn't doing that in 2 years. Well, what about Indiana? Indiana's the anomaly, and they weren't that bad. You know, they were one of the worst Power 4 teams, which means they were one of the worst of the 68. But when you get down to a 16-team playoff in a 60-something league, which is really what this is about, then it's not as great. This notion of, you know, only 6 to 24 of the 130-something teams compared to – it's a silly argument. Well, they got 76 teams in NCAA basketball. Yeah, there's over 300 Division I teams in basketball. So this notion of, well, the NFL does – stop trying to turn college football into the NFL. It's a different sport as far as like how it's constructed and how it's grown and developed and how you play. You can't compare the 32nd team versus the number 1 team in the NFL and say, well, that's the worst team in the NFL compared to the best team in the NFL, because those teams are way closer than the number 130-something team in the NFL. And, Sean, if we're being real about it, there's a much closer gap between number 32 in NFL and number 1 in the NFL and the number 32 team in college football compared to the number 1 team in college football. Because the number 32 team in the NFL on any given Saturday can beat the best team in the NFL. And that happens somewhat regularly. In college football, that would not happen as much in the way that we see it in the NFL. So this notion that that's how it's going to be, it's just nonsense. It's a stupid comparison. It's an absolutely useless comparison. You know, like it's like saying, well, why shouldn't the NBA expand to all? How many teams in the NBA, Sean? Is it 30?
Yes, 32
Why
teams.
not put all 30 NBA teams in the playoffs? Well, what are you talking about, Brian? Well, they have 68 teams in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. That's over twice as many as the NBA. So why shouldn't it? That's a stupid argument. They're 2 different sports, 2 different games, 2 different leagues. It's dumb. So this notion that, well, we should go to 24. You don't need a 24-team playoff to get rid of conference championship games. You should get rid of them now if you stay at 12. There's no point in having a conference championship game. Name me one conference championship game, Sean, that has impacted a team getting in or out outside of the fact that in year 1, automatic bids were given to the conference champions. Name me one team that has been knocked out or has jumped in because they won or lost a conference title game outside of an auto bid. Name me one.
Can't.
We just watched Alabama get destroyed by Georgia in the SEC title game, and they didn't even drop a spot. Like, okay, you don't want to knock them out, fine. At least put Miami ahead of Alabama. You know what I mean? Like, Miami was clearly a better team than Alabama. So you didn't even drop them a spot in the freaking rankings. But you dropped Notre Dame a spot, a team that hadn't lost since the 3rd week of the season and had won 10 straight games by double digits. So you just told us, the committee just told us the Power 4 conference title games mean nothing. Nothing. You can go up if you win, right? We've seen teams like go up a spot. In 2024, the conference championship games essentially rearranged the top 4. That's it. Right? That's all it did. Yeah. Oregon was 1. Georgia went up, over Texas. Texas stayed 3. Penn State stayed 4. So basically, the top 4 teams were the 2 teams in the playing for the SEC title and 2 teams for playing the Big Ten title, and they just rearranged those 4 teams, but they were still the top 4 teams. So how did that impact the postseason? How did those games impact the postseason at all? In a 12-team playoff. So forget what it would do in a 16-team playoff. So every team that plays in a Power 4 championship game that is ranked in the playoff field is not falling out by playing or losing in a conference championship game.
Yeah. No.
Well, that's just because
no effect.
It was SMU the year before, Sean.
Yeah.
So why are we playing it right now? You don't need to go to 24 freaking teams to get rid of the conference championship games. You don't. find a happy medium. Go to 16, get rid of conference championship games, give Army Navy their weekend, first Saturday, September, kick the 16-team playoff that following weekend. 4 games on Friday, 4 games on Saturday.
And in the future, there will be another Indiana. There's going to be a team that hasn't been good. That's going to find a charismatic, very intelligent, smart coach that has a plan that has not been implemented to say, I can turn this around quickly. And I'm bringing my guys with me. It might not be in the exact form, but it will be in that form that is productive in that time. It's going to happen, and it's going to be an anomaly. The challenge now is, can it be sustainable at Indiana? And can Indiana keep that said coach at Indiana without moving on to another big-time program or possibly moving on to the NFL? Like, that is the challenge. And then if he does leave, are they attractive enough to grab the next guy to say, okay, I want to come to Indiana? Or does the next guy say, I don't know if that's really a place that can do it over and over again? I mean, that's a challenge. Like you said, you use the word anomaly. And it's kind of counterproductive to have everything, thinking not strange, everybody, that they're in a rush to get legislation in place before this big economic boom that is coming from expansion. The revenue is going to grow like crazy once this second expansion takes place. And the only reason they're talking about expanding is because the first expansion from 4 to 12 was successful. They didn't know how it was going to play out, but it has been hugely successful. So now they're like, okay, let's do it again. Let's cap everything with legislation for the players, and then we can begin to make most of the money off of the second expansion. And like everything's falling right in line for the coaches, the schools, the presidents. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're not worried. I'll keep fans. Let's be honest. Let's have a moment of transparency here. Brian ran down the list of games that would have been played. As much as I sit here and say, I don't want to see it, I would have found myself on the couch with my remote, flipping back and forth, just peeking in on games, just because I love the game.
We'll watch it. It's also our job to talk about it, Sean, but I'm not going to be sitting there in week 12 like, okay, who's going to win this Arizona versus Kansas State game? Because the winner's going to get to be the sacrificial lamb to play something. That's what they're trying to tell us. It makes games more meaningful. You're not sitting there on a Saturday afternoon waiting on the Notre Dame game, flipping back and forth between LSU versus Alabama to watch the Virginia versus, Duke game to find out which one's going to get in number 22.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't.
But they know.
Come on.
It makes absolute expansion makes absolute business sense because they know they have the consumer base. They have the consumer base that is going to come to the party. They have it. However, they have to be mindful of the side effects, because there are side effects of this that you can just kind of say, well, ignore that. That can come back and bite you in the end. And that's what I worry about.
Let me tell you something else, Sean. Let me tell you something else. There are certain people in power in different places, whether it's sports or politics or whatever. We just had something in Indiana that happened where a group of people said, hey, well, we're going to do this thing. We're going to go against what we think people want, because we've read polls that told us, no, this is popular. They voted for a thing. It wasn't popular. It was, they got bad information. They were believing something that wasn't true, and it cost them. I think what's happening in college football is they're looking at viewership and they're spinning it, number one, because they changed the way that TV ratings are evaluated. So it means that they show more. Number two, I think you guys are buying into more of you think that the sport continues to get more popular, when in reality, there's something else you're doing that will undercut this growth and make you show it's a bubble. They're trying to get rid of a lot of the gambling from college football. What they don't understand is how many people are watching these games because they have money on the line. You get rid of the gambling, which I'm not against, all of a sudden you realize, wow, where did the viewership go? Well, some guy's not watching this first quarter of the Arizona State-Utah game because he doesn't have money on who's going to score first because he's a degenerate. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reality of it. It's a false bubble, in my opinion, because but there's also the fear of you go beyond a certain point, there are lines you can cross. Because if you wanted to say it, Sean, well, more playoffs is good for everyone. Okay, then let's just go to how many Power 4 teams on there? 68? Let's just go to a 68-team playoff. Let's play 9. Let's just be in the Indiana take the Indiana high school playoff rules. Everybody plays 9 games, and then everybody gets into the playoffs. And then just, hey, you made the playoffs. Congrats. You only played 9 regular season games. You went into the playoffs at 5-4. Got annihilated, but good job, buddy. You can tell everyone back home that you led your team to the playoffs. I mean, if I was a head coach in Indiana, I'd be like, hey, man, I lead my team to the playoffs every year, baby. Didn't you go 1-9 last year? Yeah, still made the playoffs. Hey, we got in. We had a shot to make a run, Sean. We got in. We had a shot to make a run. No, you didn't. Getting in does not mean you got a shot. Like, in theory, I guess that's technically true, but nobody believes that's actually going to happen. Well, Texas could have gone on a run. No, they wouldn't have, because the first team they played that had anything in the trenches would have beat them just like Georgia did in November, 35-10. Number 2, they were still the 13 seed, not the 19 or 20 or 21 seed. So I do think that they need to be careful in looking too much into certain numbers without proper context. And not thinking about, how about we give this time to breathe a little bit before we take the next gigantic leap off of a cliff, because this one worked out, the next one might not. And I think that's the risk they run. I understand expansion is going to happen. I'm not set on 12 teams has got to be it, because I do think there's a case to be made that in today's portal era, there's a better chance for a 11, 12, 13, or 14 to make a run than there was 5 years ago before the portal. I'll accept that. It's rare, but I'll accept it. I don't think Texas would have made a run, but I'll accept the fact that I think people could make a genuine case of why they would have. I don't agree, but I'll accept it. But I know for sure that the number 11 team could have made a run. I know that for a fact because we watched that team all year. So, okay, expand, but you're now going to the point where you're going to sacrifice a lot to go to 24, and you're not going to get the return that I think you're going to get. Well, we're just going to get all this more money from ESPN. You sure? Because I don't know that ESPN's as strong as you think it is right now either.
Yeah. I think I would caution against going beyond 16. And I will also love to see the presidents and the schools take a little bit of power back from the agents, especially because it's growing, like with NIL, like, and maybe legislation can cap that to us or kind of put borders or guardrails around that to a certain extent. But I'll tell you this, as NIL has given, as someone said in the chat, like a sense of parity. It's given other schools and other programs a sense of parity, right? We have a chance. Indiana makes other schools, like in Oklahoma State or any other school, or Vanderbilt, feel like there's a chance. Okay, there's a chance. I mean, there's a chance where you can have a 200-1 heavyweight underdog walk in the ring and one punch knocks the favorite out, and he's the champion of the world. Yeah, it's always a chance. But now you're creating this parity, but you're making it more difficult by condensing the season and adding more games, because you're taking away the roster depth and making it more difficult for everybody. And now it's a war of attrition. You're fighting against yourself. Like, I want to see some alignment in these decisions to say, okay, that makes sense. And that's line upon line. That's precept upon precept. Okay, I see how this is coming together and how this picture is that's starting to manifest itself and become clear. I don't see that right now. I see a lot of things that are, progressive and moving the game forward. And then I see some other things that we should really be
There's just not
cautious
enough
about.
of that first one, Sean. That's the problem. There's not enough of that first one because people don't actually care about making the game better. They care about how can we make more money. Yeah. And in reality is you've got to find a balance between the two.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to saying, hey, how can we make more money? But not at the not while sacrificing all these things. And then you say, okay, we're going to play all these more games, make all this more money. And then the point you made earlier, while also advocating for caps on how much the players can make. So we're going to cap what they make and then find ways to make even more money that we are going to get a cut of. Come on, y'all. Like, you all think we're stupid. You really think we're stupid. And unfortunately, when you look on X, you're like, yeah, some people buy this, Sean. Some people buy this. I don't. And you don't. So we could spend the next 3 hours just talking about this topic. I think you and I definitely made our opinions known. Final takeaway, Sean, for me is this. I support expansion. 16 is the most you can go for. I think that I support getting rid of conference championship games. I support only having one bye week during the regular season, as long as there's a bye week the first Saturday of September for everybody that does not attend the Naval Academy or, West Point. Those are the only two teams you should be allowed to play the first Saturday of December. Do that. And there's a lot of this I don't mind, Sean. I really don't. I support the idea of shorter windows between most of the rounds of the playoff. I think you could tinker it a little bit for the last two rounds, and that's fine. But that's where I'm at. Get rid of the conference championship games. I accept that proposal. Reducing the bye weeks from 2 to 1. I support that part of the proposal, as long as you protect Army Navy by not letting anyone else play that weekend. And then, I support. So there's aspects of what they want that I do support. I do support, if they were being genuine, the idea that the season needs to get over with for a host of reasons. Mm-hmm. And also the season getting over gives your players more time who are leaving more time to also prepare for the NFL draft. Who knows what Xavier Watts would have been able to do if he would have had a couple extra weeks to rest, then train, and then who knows what his 40 time might have looked like if he was able to have a little bit more time off. You know what I mean? So, like, yes, I think some of the things you pretend to care about being player driven are in fact player driven, but I just don't buy that that's why you want to do it. You want to, because coaches have shown by and large, they're always going to do what's best for coaches, right? As an organization, there's individual coaches who aren't that way, but when you put them all together and they kind of have to go in one direction, it's always going to be, we defend the coaches, which is what the AFCA should be doing, but just be honest about it. Hey, we're releasing this because our job is to look at what's best for the coaches. And an expanded playoffs means more opportunities for coaches to get raises, more opportunities for coaches to get on that big stage and show what they're capable of. I'd love to see Will Stein get a chance to get in the playoffs and show what he's capable of as a head coach. But don't try to spin it that this is for the players, right? Like, because I think most people respect, like, yeah, I get that. That's why it's a union. It's not a union, but it's essentially a union, right? It serves as sort of the coaches' union, even though it's not. And they're meant to advocate for the coaches. I understand that, but just be honest about it, right? Just the Steelworkers Union doesn't get up there and talk about, hey, we need to protect the rights of teachers, right? Like, because that's not your job. That's not what you do. Your job is to do what's best for the coaches, but just be honest that that's what you're doing. Yeah. And I think we'd probably have a little bit more respect for you, because some of the things you want to do, we're not necessarily completely against. Before we get to the next segment, Sean, I did have a super chat from Jari Z. Bear. Glad to see Sean Davis and the IB crew. Also, Brian is undefeated on X. He is doing great work. Thank you for that very much.
I've missed what have you been doing on X, bro?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I just had some things to say to a SEC guy and, a couple people just every now and then. I just, got to lay it the smacketh down on some people every now and then, Sean. It's like, I don't want to do it, but it's got to be done.
But yeah, it got to be done.
Sean, let's get into part 2 of today's show on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. And we're going to continue our series on the sort of the state of the program, state of the Notre Dame program. And today, Sean and I are going to talk about the defensive tackles. And this is a very unique position group, Sean. And we're going to dive into part 1. We'll be talking about like kind of what we learned in the spring and and what kind of growth we saw, because it was a very new look group in really every way imaginable, Sean. And then part 2 of the show will, segment 2 of this breakdown will then kind of dive into, okay, let's look forward. What needs to happen from now into 2026 for this unit to be what they need it to be? And then part 3, we will dive into recruiting. We'll talk about the future. So there's the present with a slight look at the past. There's the short-term future that involves this season. And then there's the long-term future, which involves recruiting. Those will be the 3 segments. And the recruiting aspect is going to be very interesting, because there is one recruit that's part of this conversation that will be announcing his commitment to one of 5 schools next Friday. We'll talk about that and kind of give you the latest, Sean. But let's dive into D-tackle, because this is a group that has been very underrated the last couple of years. I don't think people appreciate how good Notre Dame's D-tackles have been the last couple of years. Having said that, those players are all gone. The coach that coached those guys are all gone. I feel like these, we look at Riley Mills and Howard Cross. In the last 3 years, they were both All-Americans. You look at Gabriel Rubio, just got drafted. Donovan Heinisch was a very clutch player for Notre Dame. Had a game-winning sack against Georgia. Should have had a game-winning sack against Texas A&M if he wasn't horse-collared from behind. And then Jared Dawson was a very underrated player for Notre Dame this past season. Those guys are all gone. Al Washington's gone. The Charlie Partridge era is upon us. You've got 2 new portal players. You've got some freshmen. You've got guys kind of moving inside. It's a really different looking group. And so then the question we have to ask ourselves is, can they not only continue the good play we've seen last year, but take it to another level? And what we can say right now definitively, Sean, is this group, without a doubt, has great depth. What we don't know is, does it have impact players right now that are going to provide that in 2026? So I think when you look at it, Sean, there's some things that we saw that we liked and some things that we saw where questions remain. But the one thing that this spring showed us is this is without a doubt the deepest defensive tackle room we've seen from a number standpoint, but even more importantly, from these guys can help you. We watched the 4th string D tackles get on the field in the blue gold game, and like Davion Dixon is balling. Elijah Golden's going to be a problem for people. I love the depth that we've seen from the defensive tackle room. That's the one thing we can take away is, I don't know how good they're going to be, but they're going to be throwing waves of at least solid players at people this season. There's no question about that.
Yeah, with health being the context of this next statement, it was strange to hear Chris Ash in the aftermath say he was still looking for that depth when he was asked about the depth. But I think he was speaking from not having the opportunity because of health reasons to see all of that on full display during the spring. So when you talk about guys, and it's a mixture, bro. It's a mixture of guys, if you want to call it their last chance to shine at Notre Dame, if you want to say it's guys where the window or the door has swung open and it's their opportunity chance to bust through it, or just walk through it to determine how they want to be seen and what the rest of their career in Notre Dame and possibly on the next level is going to look like. Then you have the promise of some true freshmen that are just flashing from day one in the spring. And we knew that they were going to be flash and be different, covering them in their high school recruitment. And then you have guys that are coming over that are veterans, like a Francis Brew. And then you have a kid like Tion Gray, which is, just looking on the board, there were some people that weren't exactly impressed with Tion Gray in the blue and gold game. But I always caution, I think Jared Dawson said it best, man. I just think the culture, because you're not going to win in current football if you don't have a culture. That's just the way it is, because this is not, kumbaya. Everybody gets 3 to 4 years to hang out with each other. You've been recruited. No one's leaving. Those days are over. The turnover, even though Notre Dame doesn't have as high of a turnover as everybody else with people leaving, and recruits coming in as far as the transfer portal, it's just different now. But the culture that has been set at Notre Dame, you can tell that it's kind of a shock to these transfers when they come in. Like, whoa, this is not how we did it at Louisville. This is not how we did it at Oregon. This is not how we did it at Ohio State. Like, oh, y'all boys really go to class. Y'all really have to make sure you manage your time correctly. Like, oh man, we have to take study tables serious. Like, yeah, because in that football building, there's only so much they can do to protect you when it comes to the academic side. It's not like everybody else or every other program, right? It's like it's only so much that Marcus Freeman can do if you're not handling business in the classroom. And so going back to tradition, that's a tradition that I love, that I hope, and I'm pretty sure that is going to stay intact at Notre Dame, even as they evolve with the sport, and they've shown that they're willing to evolve. But I just think, getting back to the point that depth is there, and it's flexible depth. I forgot to mention kids like Cole Mullins, who is outside, but you might see him inside in certain snaps. Chris Burgess and what he brings to the table. You talked about Davion Dixon. Heck, Sean Sevillano Jr. is still in there. Like, he's going to be key, short yardage, goal line, just his size and his ability to hold at the point of attack. It's just a lot of versatility and flexibility on this defensive line to be able to do a lot of different things, maybe even get into some three-man fronts at certain times.
Why, Sean? How can you do that? Because you have different body types. You have guys that can bring different skill sets to the table. You're not going to ask Sean Sevillano to do the same things that you're going to ask Jason Onye to do. There's some things that he can do that Jason can do, but then other things he can't do. I can put Jason Onye in a 4-eye technique and expect him to still make plays. I'm not going to ask Davion Dixon to do that, right? Just like I don't necessarily want to ask, Elijah Golden to say, get on the nose and two gap. You know what I mean? But I'll ask Tiki Hola to do that. I'll ask Davion Dixon, Sean Sevillano, Francis Brew, Jason Onye, and Tion Gray to do that. I don't know that I want to ask Armel Mookum to do that, but I'll put Armel in a 4-eye and let him go attack. And I think that's something that I like about this depth is it's not 12 of the same dude or all guys that are kind of good at the same things. Even if they're built different, they can have, they're all run stuffers or they're all pass rushers. Yeah, they may look different, but they all thrive at certain things and you have to line them up a certain way. There's a really nice blend of difference of opinion. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we're at with this. Let's talk about the transfer class, Sean, because I think the one thing that we did learn this spring is this transfer class, I believe, is better than even we expected it to do. No, I did not think Tion Gray was very good in the blue gold game, but he was a lot better in the jersey scrimmage in the game that meant a little bit more. He wasn't terrible in the blue gold game. And you also realize that's what you're going to have to live with Tion Gray a little bit. You're going to have to live with some games where he's just not going to knock your socks off. He's not going to be Riley Mills where he just kind of goes out there for 9-10 straight weeks and just dominates. I don't think he's going to be that guy in 2026. But when he's on, he's a difference maker. And then once Francis Brew kind of got healthier towards the end of the spring, you're like, yep, that's the dude that Notre Dame got from Pitt. So I think the first and foremost, this team could have had a good defensive tackle group without the transfers, but the transfers give it a chance to be really good if they're as good as we thought they were coming in. And I think that's the one thing we learned is Tion Gray is, I think, a little better than expected. Francis Brew is everything that we hoped he would be. But now he's surrounded by better players, which is going to make him even more effective. So I think that's the one thing when you talk about what we learned this spring, that's the first thing that we learned right there is this transfer class is going to be good. How good? Sure, that's a question. Like, I don't know that we have an answer to that yet, but there's no doubt that duo raises the bar for this D tackle room as a whole. No question about it.
And I don't know specifically, I say this specifically, I don't know. And this is why I give grace in terms of Francis Brew, Tion Gray, or going back to last year, Jared Dawson. It's like, because there were times during the spring with Jared Dawson, we were like, I don't know. I thought he would be a little bit better. And then all of a sudden you see him during the season, like,
sure.
Yeah.
He did not blow us away in the spring.
No, we talked about that.
Right.
And so this is what I'm saying. Like, you have to give grace because you don't know what young men, the adjustment they have to make, and you don't know if they're being broken down to be built back up or being asked to do something totally different based upon where they came from, right? What is Tion Gray being asked to do totally different things away from Oregon?
Well,
Like,
yeah,
the
he
Oregon
is.
staff wanted, that's what
Right.
I'm
He
saying.
is.
Like, so if that's
M-
the case, you have to give people time. I expect
Certainly.
him to be much better in the fall,
But
knowing,
here's
okay,
my
this is
point,
what they're
Sean.
asking
Here's
of
my
me.
point. Even if he isn't, even if in the fall he's the same guy we saw this spring, even if that's all we get from him, my point is I'm happy because we've already seen him do things that he was not asked to do at Oregon and him to do them effectively. So if we have to live with some inconsistency and effort from him, I don't like it. I don't, I won't defend it, but it's like, but you live with it. It's kind of like Deshaun Watson throwing 17 picks the year that Clemson won the title. I don't like it. I'm not telling him to throw 17 interceptions. I'm not saying, hey, Deshaun, that was a beautiful interception. When I'm in the film room with him on Monday, I'm like, this is the prettiest interception I've ever seen. Keep it up, brother. No, it's like, hey, let's correct it. Let's fix it. But hey, man, watch this play right here. That's why we're winning with Deshaun. That's why we won the title right there. I can live with those things because of what he provides over here. My point is, even if he doesn't get better, getting him was absolutely a win because of just what we've seen so far. So even if he doesn't change at all, that's a good win. If, to your point, he then gets better, that could be the thing that says, okay, can he elevate it to like, okay, now they have a truly elite D tackle room as opposed to just the D tackles being part of an elite defensive front. Because I think you could say neither the tackles, I think you could say this, the tackles may not be elite by themselves, the ends may not be elite by themselves, but they can be elite as a whole. And that's where I'm at. So like, you are correct. There's absolutely, it would actually be likely that Francis and Tion get better as they get more into the system, and they're both true juniors.
Absolutely.
But my argument is this, Sean, is even if they don't, getting them was a win by just what we've seen from them so far.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters. There's a baseline with those two to start with that I'm happy with. And that's what I say, like, this is a positive that we saw in the spring. Yes, I'd like to see Tion be more consistent, but even if he isn't, that playmaking, that size, that beef, because there's times when it's like, I'll say this, people that were at the Jersey scrimmage came out of the spring with a far different opinion of Tion Gray than people that only saw him in the blue gold game. Because the people that saw him whooping the offensive line a lot during the Jersey scrimmage are like, yo, that's a 6'6", 330-pound dog right there, buddy. So it's just when you have a player who's still, going into just his second year in the rotation, you're going to have, and I just think he's naturally not the biggest self-motivator in the world. There's going to be days like that, but you live with that because of the other things that he brings to the table. And I think that's where I was coming from, Sean, is just the two of them as they are right now is a win. So that's where I'm at with the two D tackles. Let's move on to the next part of this, Sean, as we look at the spring and the things that we learned this spring. We talked about the transfer class. The other one is the junior class was in a show me mode or you're going to get left behind. We're talking about Cole Mullins and Sean Sevillano. Now, I don't think either of them locked in a rotation spot, and there's still an uphill climb to get there. But what I think those two kids showed us this spring, Sean, is they are not just kind of like, well, we're on these two transfers. Onye's back, and Elijah Golden and Tiki Hole are here. Oh, well, Chris Burgess moved inside. It's been fun, brother. I'm just going to go ahead and hang out and just enjoy being on the scout team. They came out this spring and battled, and I think it's guys like them that, to me, really solidify just how deep this room is. Because if they go 5 deep, but 2 guys get hurt during the season, now all of a sudden they're 3 deep. The way I look at it now is if they go 5 deep and they want to have a 5-man rotation and a guy goes down, plug, you're still 5. Another guy goes down, plug, you're still 5, and you're still good. And it's guys like Sean Sevillano and Cole Mullins. And I think Cole was more consistently productive throughout the spring. Sean was a little up and down, but I think he finished really well. He had a good Jersey scrimmage, and he had a pretty darn good blue gold game when he was in there. So I think those two guys, kind of their emergence this spring, say, hey, you've solidified how strong the depth is by those two players really taking strides this spring.
Yeah, and that's that particular area that I was talking about. You just have a group of guys that really, and Cole Mullins, like you said, for him, it's been about opportunity, but he's been a kid in the limited opportunities. He's always found a way to make the most of that opportunity. He continued to do so in the scrimmage and from what we saw in the blue and gold game. Sean Sevillano, from my standpoint, was a guy that probably when he got in, needed to get himself into a better position, just shape-wise, to really be able to make an impact. But he has a niche. Like, he has a niche that he can make. And you talked about the added depth through the portal, through recruiting, and other guys moving inside. Sean Sevillano, his body type is a body type that, you fit this mold, especially in short yardage, goal line, certain situations, you can become that guy. Or you can become one of those guys that we depend on. And we've seen it at defensive line, especially on the interior with Notre Dame. More than likely, if you're the second or third guy, you're going to be needed at some point during the season. Like, you just never know. All of a sudden, we find out Gabriel Rubio's not available against USC. All right. Sean Sevillano came in, got an opportunity, actually played well on the few snaps that he had. So that's all you can ask of these kids. Like, when you get your opportunity, be ready, make the most of the opportunity, and be a great teammate. And I think that's what you see. You look, man, when you really look at this depth chart right here, I would say this: the person that has not been talked about that I have a lot of intrigue around is Gordy Solstad. Because I remember just watching recruiting when I actually saw his arm length, and now they've gotten him up to 6'5", 275. It's like, okay, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he had an injury.
He was out again. He's been hurt most of his tenure at Notre Dame.
Yeah. So once again, that's the help. We haven't even mentioned Elijah Hughes. He was a pleasant surprise last season. I think he's going to be even better this year. He's kind of like along the lines of he wears the same number as Howard Crow. So he's along the lines of Howard Crow.
With Elijah Hughes, I think there's a world in which he just is what he is. I don't know that there's another gear for him, which I'm fine with. I'm good. I'm good with that. Like, there is that level of, hey, this is who he is. Like, that's okay. That's okay. That's good. And I think the other players stepping in, you see seeing Francis Bruin. And so this is the depth chart of basically how they had it. Now, what was interesting, Sean, if you see this, is left tackle, right tackle. I kind of went back and was thinking through the Jersey scrimmage, and then I watched the blue gold game. And what we saw in that game was they were basically playing left and right tackle. They weren't playing nose and 3 technique. So whoever's on the left was the 3 or the nose or the 2-eye or whatever they needed to do. And whoever's on the right was doing the same. So I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but that's what I'm kind of going with the depth chart standpoint. This is essentially how they finished the spring, projecting Jason Onye to be back on top. Because when they played the spring game, you had Tion Gray and Armo Mukum with the 1s, and then you had Francis Brew and Elijah Hughes with the 2s. So I think that's where that comes from. But I don't think any of those things are set in stone. But that just gives you a rough idea of kind of where they were at. But I think when you look at it, Sean, and you see like Elijah Hughes is that number 3 guy once Jason Onye comes back, if that's true and that's how it plays out, like, you're in a pretty good place. If Elijah Hughes and Cole Mullins are your 3s, and you've got Chris Burgess and you've got Sean Sevillano and Davion Dixon. And I think the next thing, when I talk about what we learned this spring, we don't know the level to which Chris Burgess is going to help Notre Dame in the fall. But what we did see this spring is he's got a chance to be really good. Will it be this year? Will it be 2027? I don't know the answer to that. He's got a lot to learn about playing tackle. But what we saw is when it's right, when the technique is right, when the footwork is right, like there were times in the Jersey scrimmage where he struggled because he'd kind of come off and like not move. because it hits a lot quicker. I mean, the guy played middle linebacker half of his senior year. Like, he's not used to things hitting that quickly. And there were times where you could just tell he wasn't sure what his game plan was on how to win. And then there were other times when he knew what he was doing, and you're like, yep, he's going to be pretty good. So I think he's sort of what we learned in both ways. We learned that he's got all the tools to be a really good interior player, but we also learned he's still a bit of a work in progress. But I think the experience he got, I was glad that they moved him inside and just left him there. Let him struggle. Let him have those ups and downs, because that's how you learn. Instead of, like, cross training because then, end numbers were not good, or, oh, he's struggling, so we're just not going to play him. And no, let him have those struggles, because he's also going to get the flashes, and that's going to allow him to learn. That's how you get better. That's how you learn. And that's something we saw from him. And I'll say another thing I think we learned this spring, Sean, is Elijah Golden is probably not going to help them this year. But the main reason why he probably won't help them this year is because of the numbers. Watching Elijah Golden this spring, if this were most of the last decade prior to this last 2 years, Elijah Golden's playing out of the gate. Elijah Golden was better to me in his first spring than, like, when we first saw Myron Tungvolo-Amosa, Kurt Heinisch, guys that helped out as freshmen, guys that played as freshmen and were good players as freshmen. That's not an insult to Kurt Heinisch or Myron Tungvolo-Amosa. It's to point out those are two young men that were very important part of the rotation in 2017 as true freshmen, because they had to play. And they both stepped up. They were forced into the rotation, but they also both stepped up and helped, did some things. Elijah Golden would have, to me, been ahead of both of those guys at the same stage in their careers. And now he's sitting here fourth string at coming out of the spring. So it speaks to how deep this unit is, but I liked what I saw from Elijah Golden. I was worried when they had him at 292, like, would he need some time to get used to that size? He looked every bit as quick and explosive and productive in the spring as he looked last year. Now it's just about refining the technical parts and getting some of the grown man strength that Jason Onye's and the Francis Brews and now Cole Mullins has, because that was an issue for Cole Mullins as a freshman too, Sean. So he's another guy that impressed me in the spring.
You said something that actually piqued my interest right there, talking about Elijah Golden, because you give a lot of credit, of course, to Orlando, the staff, getting them stronger, getting his weight up, and getting the right body type for him so he can keep that quickness and that speed that you talked about. But it's just sometimes he just struck me as a young man where you just kind of wondered what his temperament was going to be and how he was going to adjust to Notre Dame. And you give most of the credit to the young man. I always give the majority of credit to the young man, because they're the ones that have to put in the work, make the decision to buy in. But I just wonder if Charlie Partridge was like the perfect coach to get a hold of him when he first got to Notre Dame. Not to be disparaging about any other coach. It just sometimes it just lines up to whereas, you know what, this is the coach that I was recruited by, but this coach actually was a really good fit for this young man, technically, to just really give him the foundation for what he needed. And like going back and looking at the way you talked about them playing left, right, I think that just points to the type of coaching that these guys are receiving from the technical aspect, not only just looking at it from a force, but looking at it from knowing the game pre-snap as well. Like recognizing, okay, I'm left this time, I'm right, this formation. Those are things that they're being challenged that are NFL type outlooks that's being brought, to the defensive line room on the interior that I think, I think we all have kind of looked at the defensive line in the past and said, oh man, where is this at? Where's this technique? Where's this counter? Well, and I think now some of the things you pointed out, and just where to say Elijah Golden is further ahead, I don't think is happened circumstance or just a fluke. that he's there just because we knew the ceiling.
Right.
We knew the ceiling the kid had.
And that's what it's about, Sean. It's you're recruiting a higher level of player.
Yeah.
And it didn't just start with the Elijah Golden and Tiki Hola class.
No.
It is you went out and got a Chris Burgess. You got a very underrated player in Cole Mullins, who I was very high on. I still wish they would have left him at end, but that's it is what it is.
Yeah.
You've consistently landed a higher level of player. There's another level they need to get to, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Absolutely.
But when you look at this depth chart, there's guys like, look, even a guy like Brendan Vernon, he's never going to play at Notre Dame. Like he's not going to be the player that we had hoped he would be. But you watch him in the blue gold game the last 2 years, and you're like, this guy is we've seen guys in the rotation better that are not better than him. Like when they had all those injuries in 2014, they would have loved to have had a kid like Brendan Vernon at the end of the year to plop in there instead of true freshman Jacob Matuska, or years where they were trying to thrust Brandon, T. Awesome and Micah Treadway were battling to get in the rotation. You know what I mean? Like that just speaks to the depth of his team. A guy like Davion Dixon, not that long ago, would absolutely be fighting for a 2-deep spot right now. And he's currently 6th. Now he's 6th. That's a lot of that has to do with kind of like age. Like he's obviously a little younger than Sean, but he could climb up. But if he climbs up 3 spots from where he is now, he's 3rd at just one position. I think that's the thing we acknowledge is you cannot look at this depth chart that we're looking at here. And on the left side, you've got Armo Mookum, Francis Brew, Cole Mullins, Elijah Golden, Brendan Vernon, and then the guy that you're intrigued by in Gordy Solstead. And then at the right side, looking at Jason Onye, Tion Gray, Elijah Hughes, Christopher Burgess Jr., Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon, and Tiki Hola. There's guys that are 4th, 5th, and 6th on these depth charts that are playing as rookies. And not that long ago, Sean. I'm not talking about like during the Ty Willingham era or the end of the Charlie. I'm talking about like within the last 5 years when they've been pretty good, years where they were pretty good. You don't think that Elijah Golden is battling for a number 2 job on the 2018 defensive line? Of course he is. Of course he is. And if he doesn't get in the 2 deep, what he does is he forces them to expand to 5. Davion Dixon, I think, is fighting for a rotation spot then. So that's kind of where I look at it, is I'm impressed by the depth of this unit. We will talk in part 2 about how good they can be, but there's a lot of good football players here. What we're going to have to find out in the future is, do they have any impact players in this group? But at the very least, they have this. And here's why it matters in the Chris Ash defense. Because with Chris Ash's defense, and this is actually, Sean, this is a praise of Chris Ash. He doesn't need game changers at D tackle to still have a pretty good defensive line against the run. Like we saw that last year. You had a 6th-round draft pick and an undrafted free agent. And let's be honest, Donovan Heinisch probably goes undrafted. Donovan Heinisch has like late day 2, early day 3 talent. Unfortunately, though, it's in the body of a 6'2", maybe 275-pound kid. He's a really good football player. And that's not a knock on him. Caden Curry was a dominant player last year for Ohio State. All Big Ten player, all American player. He went round 6 because he's small. That's just how the NFL works. Donovan Heinisch was a darn good football player during the last couple of years, but he was undersized. He's not a first-team All-American player. And they were very stout against the run last year. Very stout. I mean, last year when people say, well, I'm going to complain about the run defense, it wasn't as good as you say it is. Okay, cool. What games are you referring to? Miami and A&M. I'm like, yeah, they weren't as good as they needed to be in those games. Like, Sean and I aren't going to sit here and defend, like, what are you talking about? They were great against Miami and A&M. No, they weren't. They still only gave up 134 and 128 yards and held them to 3.5 and 4.0 yards per play. And a good chunk of the 128 yards that Texas A&M had were quarterback scrambles in the pass game. So they weren't as good as they needed to be, but they were still good. If that's your worst performance of the season, you're a pretty good run defense. But there's obviously another level that they can get to with dominant players. But what we saw last year is even with just good, solid college football players, you can have a top 10 rush defense because he doesn't require as much playmaking if he doesn't have it. Whereas Val Golden didn't have those type of players, he doesn't have as many buttons to push within his system to get there. It's not better, it's not worse, because then there's other things that Al Golden's system helps them better at than others. That's the nature of all schemes. Is some schemes are going to help you do this and others are going to help you do that. It's not better, not worse, just different. So that's why I'm confident in the run defense this year, even though I'm sitting here asking the question that we will dive into in kind of part 2 of this breakdown, which is there anybody great in this group? Is there anybody that's really, really good? Or is it just a bunch of good, solid players? We'll ask that question. But even if it's not, even if Jason Onye is just the same guy he was last year, and Armel Mukam is just a solid player, and Francis Brew is just the player he was last year, and Tion Gray is just the player he was last year, Elijah Golden is just the player he was last year, even with that, they're still going to be pretty good against the run because of the way Chris Ash has shown. I can just ask the D tackles to do this and not ask him to go be Riley Mills because we don't have Riley Mills. And we're going to still be pretty good against the run. Now, pass game, that's a different story. I'm very specifically talking about the run defense right now. And that's kind of where we're at with this group.
Yeah.
So let's get into go ahead,
no,
Sean.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
You have something to add.
Just,
we can wrap this up before we move on to the next part. Go for it.
Let's get to the next part. Because it'll bleed into the next part. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, Sean, let's kind of get in the next section of the D tackle breakdown. And in part 2 of this D tackle breakdown, we're going to kind of talk about what's next. In part 1, we talked about, look, we both feel at the floor of this defensive line. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm representing your point of view, Sean, correct me. But I believe we both feel that the floor of this defensive tackle room it's a good, solid group that has a lot of size and a lot of depth and a lot of numbers, and they can be a good, solid, physical, stop the run group. Fair?
Yeah.
That's the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's the ceiling? I think that's where we start getting into what comes next, what growth might we see, who might be a breakout, what are the things Charlie Partridge still needs to work on, because we're only in practice through 15 practices of him getting 40 practices with this group to get him ready for Wisconsin. And then what we might see is development in the season. So we're just getting to we're in Charlie Partridge 101 classes right now. We haven't got into the upper level classes just yet. So I think there's a question to have here is we can say this group has a lot of talent. It has a chance to be part of a championship defense, but how good will they be specifically? I think that's where the question is as we move forward.
I'm trying to find a comparative. We're not talking about an interior that has the 2 dominant guys on the inside, say like what Michigan had a couple of years ago, right? I don't see 2 first-round picks on the defensive line right now. Could someone within this group become that? I mean, heck, Elijah Golden has the ceiling to become, just off the top of my head. Tion Gray has the physical capabilities.
Right. Christopher
to become
Burgess.
that. Christopher Burgess would be in that group as well. But you just don't see it right now. But in the aspect of what's needed, right? I don't think in order to win, I don't think we just watched the team in contrast, which is absolutely amazing. Because that's why I thought it was such a great matchup in the national championship game, because of the contrast of those 2 teams that were dominant and really good in the trenches in totally different ways on both sides of the ball. Like what they were facing wasn't what they faced in practice every day, but it was just as dominant. So to trying to figure out how to impact that, Indiana does it with a lot of movement, right? Working together as a unit and being sound and fundamental and staying in your gaps. And just that's not to dismiss Miami as being like just out there wild running around, but they're just more gifted player to player, especially on the interior with what they had. So I think I'm not about to shortchange this group though with their ability, because I do think this is a ceiling group that if they really hit the ceiling, can become really dominant, can really become a factor as far as pressuring the quarterback, which should help your edge rushers because they'll be one-on-one a whole lot more, right? And in the run game, we have seen improvement over the last 3 seasons with Notre Dame in the run game. And with this added depth and size, I expect that to continue. So overall, I think the floor has been raised without a question. And I think the biggest question mark is going to be answered during the season, which is what is going to be the ceiling, or what is the ceiling for this group. And who is going, one or two guys are going to break out. One or two guys, I believe, are going to break out and kind of be out front. Who's going to be that guy? I think a guy like Jason Onye is a perfect candidate to be that guy. He really is. Look,
that's where we got to start, Sean, is Jason Onye.
And this is a young man that I think deserves a lot of credit for where he is right now and the obstacles, self-inflicted, that he's had to overcome to get to this point. I know fans are probably a little bit almost to the point of, we've heard how great of a spring he's had, what great a position he's in going into the fall. And if it's not one thing, it's another that comes up. But actually, man, look, I think that's one thing that stood out to me when I heard him speak this spring. And I was like, he recognizes that this is the moment. He recognizes that. And now I'm very interested in seeing what the combination of the impact, shall I say, of Charlie Partridge on all of these guys, right? All of these different individual, you know it better than anybody from your time as a coach, man. It's you're a teacher, and the job of the teacher is to be able to be relatable to every one of the students. Like, you have a lesson, and that lesson, it's the job of the students to listen and submit themselves to what you're teaching, but it's your job to figure out a way to be able to relate and make the lesson relatable to everybody in your group, right? As best as you can. And I'm very interested in how, from what we've heard, not only from Chris Ash, but Marcus Freeman, that has been very successful as far as that transition from the coaches, and particularly Charlie Partridge. So that is something that I think specifically about a guy like Jason Onye. Like, we've seen him on the potter's wheel with someone else. Now we get an opportunity to see this talent on a different pot with a different sculptor. And I'm excited about that. Because I think he should be excited about that. And I think that aligning with him knowing this is it. This is my shot. And if I really go out here, we're talking about a young man. If he goes out and performs at the level we think he can perform at, we're talking about somebody that will get possibly second day thoughts or looks.
Possibly
in the NFL.
He's definitely getting looked at early in day 3.
Yes.
Because like a lot of the issues that teams are going to have with him, as far as like missed time for whatever reason, they had the same issue with Gabriel Rubio, and he still went in round 6.
And only takes one team.
Right. Exactly. And there was a lot of good film with Gabriel. Good film with Gabriel. There was also a lot of like, hey, you can be better, you should be better, and all that. But like it's like you said, it's six round draft pick. There's a lot of good film with Jason Onye. And the difference is Jason's stuff has not been it hasn't just been injuries. It's been other things that, as long as the people are satisfied with that, there's no concern of it being like a long-term physical deterioration, like a knee that you've blown out a couple times. So I think when you look at Jason Onye, Sean, it really comes down to this with me is, can he put together a full season? Last year was really the first year we saw him put together a full season where he was just on the field, for 12 games. But last year was the polar opposite of the year before. The year before, Jason Onye got hot early because he had a great spring. I mean, it was the second straight great spring in a row that he had. He came out last season. I remember having a conversation with, Ryan Roberts and I were talking, we were breaking down games and stuff, and we're talking, and like, this is before this might have been during like the bye week between Louisville and Stanford. And we're like, dude, I think he might have been their best D tackle the last month. Like, I think this was before Riley like really took off in 2024. And we're like, I think Jason Onye might be their best D tackle. And in the 3 games before he got, had to leave the team, he had 10 pressures and 3 run stops in 3 games. And those 10 pressures came, Sean, on only 40 snaps. Like, that means if he only plays 20 snaps in a game, only 20 pass snaps in a game, which in the last 6 games he played 22, 24, 9 because they killed, 22, 19, and 15. Played 19 against Syracuse because, again, they were blowing that team out. But he had, so in that 20 snaps, that's 5 pressures, and playing only 20 snaps in the game. So he was flashing. What we saw in the spring from against Purdue, Miami, and Louisville, we saw from him in that stretch of 3 games. And then he has to step away from the team. And he came out last fall, and he, starts the first game, had a good fall camp, but was clearly not the same player to start the season. And you just watch him and you're just like, he's okay, solid. He's okay. He's doing his job, but he's not really doing anything beyond just doing his job and just being there. Then the USC game happened. And Jason was dominant. He was dominant. He was outstanding in that game. Had 2 pressures in the game, had 2 run stops in the game, was very disruptive at the point of attack, was showing the ability to get off blocks, and plays really well. And then the next week against BC, they can't block him. He has 5 pressures in the game. And then he plays really well against Navy. Then he goes out and has a really good game against Pitt. 3 pressures, a sack, had a run stuff. And Syracuse, the same story. Pressure, 3 run stops. Comes out the next game against Stanford. He was one of the few D linemen that I thought was actually good that game. Had 2 pressures and 2 run stops. And finished the season on the same rate he was playing before in the previous season. So, like, we've seen him show stretches over 3 to 6 games where he can be a dominant player. And if you look at the production he had last season, and he had 15 pressures on 111 pass snaps. So if you go and you kind of say, hey, can you, what would that look like if he did that production over the course of a full season? You're talking about a guy that's playing dominant football. And I'm going to just compare him to Riley Mills and the pass rush production we saw from Riley Mills 2 years ago. If you take Jason Onye and the production he had at the end of last season, so 15 pressures on 111 pass rush snaps, and you give him the 291 pass rush snaps that Riley Mills had 2 years ago, he's got 39 pressures. Riley had 34. If you give him the same number, if you go compare it, so Riley was an All-American the previous year. If you give him the same number of snaps, if he had that production, the same number of snaps as what Howard Cross had in 23 when he was an All-American, and Howard Cross led the team in pressures that year with 39, if you give him the 341 pass rush snaps that Howard Cross has, he has 46 pressures on the quarterback last season. That's a 6'5", over 300-pound kid giving you 30-something to 40-something pressures if he can do it over the course of the season. So that's going to be the big question for Jason Onye. The injury he had this spring, from what I'm told, it's not a big deal at all. Just clean it up, and he'll be fine. It wasn't something that's going to slow down his development because, honestly, this is his 6th year. He doesn't need another spring. He's had 5. It's about what he does in the fall. I think there was benefits to it because you got some young guys, some snaps. But now the question with Jason Onye, Sean, is we'll circle back to the question that you raised is, can anybody be dominant? There's a lot of good players. Can anybody be dominant? Well, Jason Onye has shown he's capable of it. Over stretches, you say, well, yeah, but they played some bad teams last year. I don't disagree with that. But two of the best grades he had all season, his two highest games were the two most pressures he had in the game were against USC and Pitt, two ranked opponents. It's not like he had like 6 pressures against Syracuse. You know, I mean, that wasn't the game where he had one. He had one pressure against Syracuse. He didn't dominate that game. He was good against Stanford. He was, but he wasn't as dominant as he was against USC and Pitt. And you know, his best game in 2024 was against Purdue, but his second best game was against Louisville, which was a big game. It was a ranked opponent at the time. So we've seen Jason step up in big games, and we've seen him produce over stretches of time. Now the question, Sean, is can he do it more consistently? Because that's really the only thing he has to do. It's not like he's got to show us in year 6 that he knows how to use his hands finally, or that he can be more athletic, or that he can get stronger, or that he can learn this technique or that technique. He's a 6th-year senior. There's not a whole lot of new tricks that he's going to learn. There are some advancements that Coach Partridge can make. It's just now, brother, can you do that right there for the whole season? That's the question with Jason Onye. And if he can, then now you've got your impact guy up the middle. And now when he's on the field with Tion Gray or Francis Brew, you're not worried about those two guys because you're worried about blocking 47, which then makes those guys better. Because that's the thing of what a difference maker can do, Sean, is you were spending so much time worried about Riley Mills that you forgot about this other guy. And that's the kind of impact that you hope that Jason Onye can make in his last season.
He's that guy that I would love to see step out in front and become that guy in the room on the interior. But I think just, you know, what you pointed out is what you've seen, whether or not it sticks and stands through the fall and into the season, about them playing left, right, not necessarily nose, 3. I think that yields to the ability to, when you have a guy like that you identify, you can put him left, right. You've played both. We want you in this game. We think you'll have a better advantage going at this guy, the left guard.
Yeah.
So let's line you up over him in passing situations, right? And then we can pair a lot of different combinations because of
what left right means is when you're on the field, you're staying on that side, if that's what they do.
Right.
But the next series, they can put you on the other side.
Right.
And you can play right.
Right.
You just stay at right on that series. Or if somebody subs in, you move to left and that guy stays at right. But like there's no switching. But it doesn't mean that, okay, now that I'm the left tackle, I can't do anything else.
Right.
To your point. It just means like on a particular play, they switch strength, you're not flipping the nose and the, you know, or if the ball's field or boundary, it doesn't matter. I'm on the left.
Doesn't matter.
Right. And when you're a 6-year senior, Sean, to your point, you can do all of it because you've been doing all of it your entire career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just he's where it starts when we have this conversation. I think the other thing too is if Tion Gray can be more consistent, he has some of that ability as well. And we spent a lot of time talking about that in the first segment. I think there's another. I think Francis Brew, there's another level for him to get to. We saw him early in the spring, sort of. You could tell that he was being taught some new things that he wasn't comfortable with, and he looked a little, not slow because it's not slow. He looked a little. Sean, you and I, right? You've been in class before when we're taking a test, right?
Yeah.
And there's that kid in class, that real smart kid that's just like, no big deal. And then there's that kid that's like, every question's like deep in thought, and he's writing real slow because he's not sure of what he's doing, and it just looks mechanical because he's not certain of I forgot to study for this test last night, and I'm trying to think of this, and I'm trying to remember that, and I got that look on my face like this is not going to go well. I'm not sure what I'm writing down, right? And then, like I said, on the other side's that smart kid that's just, you know, and just knocking it out, and he's raising his hand at 10 minutes, and you just want to like give him a swirly in the bathroom afterwards because he's making you feel stupid, right? That's how you react as a teenager. But don't do it. You want to do it, but you don't do it. And just make sure we're clear on that one. Francis Brew was that kid that was thinking way too much early on in the spring. By the end of the spring and in the blue gold game, he was just playing. He was just playing. And you're like, that's the dude from Pitt that we remember. So I think that if they just do what they did this spring, they're going to help this team. They're good football players. But I do think, to the point you were bringing up earlier, that there is another level for both of them, because they are both being taught new things. They are learning new techniques. They are having their game enhanced by Charlie Partridge. Now it's like the more comfortable they get with this stuff, the more effective they'll be. And if we kind of get the best version of what Brew and Gray can be as juniors with a consistent Onye, now you're talking about we're having some major problems blocking this Notre Dame interior. That's what the potential is. They're not there yet, but I think those two transfers, if they can do what you were talking about earlier in the show, if they do build on it after 15 practices, now all of a sudden you're looking at this defensive line and you're not just throwing waves of good players, you're throwing waves of guys that can make a difference. And I think that's why I'm going to have my eye on Tion and Francis Brew this spring to see, is there another level that they can jump to in the fall? I think they can. There's no question. But will they, and when will it happen?
You know what I'll say? We talked about this. I think the predecessors of every defensive assistant that came over to Notre Dame walked into a room that already had an established culture. I think the culture of the defensive line room was good. I think the culture was next man up. Like, how many times have we seen, guys go down that defensive line room and that next guy up comes in and plays his tail off? And sometimes, exceeds expectations. Like, we don't expect much from guys, and we're like, oh, all right, this kid is playing his tail off. And so that culture already existed. That already existed. The same thing with the linebacker room. When you have the leaders that you have in the linebacker room, and we already know on the back end, that culture. So culture has already been set throughout the program, and especially in those positional rooms. And I just think the culture of that interior defensive line is a culture that we're not letting go of the rope. It doesn't matter who gets in this game. This is the standard. It doesn't matter, what, if I say your ceiling is here, your ceiling is that, no, go make a play, go do your job, go produce. And I think, just talking about Jason Onye and some of the other guys we think that can do that, but in doing that can do some amazing things. And then the guys we're going to talk about that they're possibly going to be bringing into the program, I think that is, where this program is and where this particular group is on the interior. And I think it's a very important group when it comes to Notre Dame taking that next step. I really do. I think the interior of this defensive line, as it improves, you will see this is already a national championship caliber program. They've yet to go ahead and plant the flag, but it's a national championship caliber program and a national championship roster. Can they go ahead and do it on the football field when it matters? That's yet to be seen. But, I think that is a recognition. I think it's pretty simple to me. It indulge me for a few seconds. It's pretty simple to me.
Why have you on?
When Kirby says, I don't know why the Big Ten. I'm trying to, is it coaching? Look, my brother.
Very interesting conversation.
Look at the quarterbacks that they've had the last 3 years, and look at the quarterbacks in the SEC the last 3 years. And that position is important, right? You can say what you want to say about J.J. McCarthy. He was a first-round quarterback. That's what they saw him as. Fernando Mendoza, first-round. Will Howard, veteran. The team was so stacked that all they needed was a veteran guy that can come in and do the job, right? The SEC in the past had rosters that were so stacked that the quarterback was part of that, particularly at schools like LSU and Alabama. But everybody else didn't have those guys. They just had guys that kind of just, along the lines of a Gunnar Stockton, if I just want to use someone. So for me, I think when Marcus Freeman comes in and he readily identifies this quarterback room and just what they have stacked up that's there and what's to come, lets you know that's been answered. And now I think what we're going to talk about with what's to come and what they've been able to do with this particular room is another recognition on the other side of the ball that, man, our linebackers are there. Our DBs are there. We got, man, this is the last area that we have to conquer in order to make sure this entire thing is at that point. And what we're talking about, this room is at a place where it can win a national championship. We think it can go out and win a national championship as a defensive line, but there's still room to grow.
Here's where I'm at. I think right now the defensive line, if Onye does what he needs to do and the two transfers do what they need to do, that this defensive tackle group can be part of a championship defense. No doubt.
Absolutely.
Same
Absolutely.
page. Here's my question. I don't believe they are there yet to the point where they're the driver of a championship defense. That's the thing. Now, when I look at, you talk about quarterback being an issue. I think a big reason why the SEC has not been as dominant lately is because they're not dominating in the trenches the way that they used to dominate in the trenches. Notre Dame beat them in the trenches, beat Georgia in the trenches 2 years ago, flat out. That's why they lost that game, because Gabriel Rubio manhandled their interior guys, because Monroe Freeling could not block R.J. Oben, Junior Tuihalamaka, Josh Burnham. It didn't matter who they threw out on the field, because Donovan Heinisch, he couldn't block Donovan Heinisch. Like, that's why Notre Dame beat them. And now their D-line held up better against Notre Dame's O-line than the other side of the ball. But even when it mattered most, Notre Dame's O-line was able to get the push they needed to move the chains late in the game and run that clock out. And so that's the big difference for me. And when I look at this group, they played that way against Georgia. They did not play that way against Penn State, and they did not play that way against Ohio State. They did against Indiana. They did against Georgia. And so that's where I think there still is a room for growth. And I think those three guys that we talked about can give you a strong foundation to say, hey, we can compete with you, but can we dominate you? And for them to get to that level, I think when you start looking at what are the unknowns, what needs to happen, that's where somebody else needs to have that breakout. And there's a couple guys that I look at and say, if one of these two guys can have a breakout that is well beyond what we've seen, but what you and I think they're physically capable of, I think that's what takes over the top. And if they can't, now we start looking to the Elijah Goldens, the Tikis, and then, of course, what we're going to talk about in the final segment. Okay, they can't give it to you. Maybe these incoming recruits can. There's two guys I have my eye on, Sean, because there's a lot of good football players. We talked about the three that we think can be really good. Cole Mullins is going to be a good part of your rotation. Elijah Hughes is going to be a good part of your rotation. Davion Dixon, Sean Sevillano, those guys can all help you and be good rotation players. But we still haven't answered, do they have difference makers? Maybe Onye can be that. Maybe the veterans can be that. But there's two guys that I think how much they continue to improve and jump between now and the regular season is going to determine who that is. And the first one is Armel Mukam. Ended the spring actually in the starting lineup. And there were moments, Trev, where we saw in practice, which we saw in the Jersey scrimmage, which we saw in the blue gold game, where, like, if we can get that version of Armel consistently, he does have the talent, in my opinion, to be what Howard Cross was in 2023. I don't know if he can be quite as good as what Riley was, like from the Louisville game on, Stanford game especially on. That remains to be seen, because Riley just took it to a whole nother level that year. But Armel showed us even more flashes than we've seen in the past this spring. His breakout could be the thing that get you over the top. And if it's not him, the good news is there's two players, then you just need one of them. If they both break out, then this team is going to be ridiculously good. The other one's Christopher Burgess Jr. If one of those two guys can make that big spring to fall jump, and we've seen it happen before, Sean. If one of those guys can do that with the three that we mentioned and all those good, solid football players, because we're not going to sit there and try to convince you guys that Elijah Hughes is going to be Riley Mills. We're not going to sit there and try to convince you guys that Sean Sevillano can be the best version of Gabriel Rubio, or he's going to be, Lewis Nix or Stephon. We're not going to try to do that to you. These guys, to me, though, do have that ability to be difference makers to some degree. Will Armel look like 2024 Riley Mills all year? Probably not. But if he can give it to me 5 or 6 games, or, then that's where you start getting excited. And that's why I think the unknown, but the thing that I'm cautiously optimistic to see in the fall is, can Armel or Chris have that big breakout moving forward? Because they do bring some of that game-changing skill to the table. And how do they – is the Charlie Partridge influence enough to get them to that next level? That's what I'm very curious to see how that plays out the next few months, Sean.
Can you quantify game breaker? Like, what is it just for a guy like Chris Burgess? Because I think game breaker is different for Jason Onye than it would be for Chris Burgess, right? I think Chris Burgess, if he can make a certain amount of plays, especially during the season, then you say, yeah. For Jason Onye to become that player, you want consistency, like you talked about, right?
Battle
you
every single
numbers,
snap.
Battle every single snap, right? So that's why I kind of point that out, because that, someone can say, man, well, you just said Chris Burgess is still growing. Yeah, but he can still make those type of plays, even with the limited snaps. And it could be on a different level than Jason.
We're on the same page. It's not Chris Burgess plays so well that he beats out Francis Brew and Tion Gray and Jason Onye. It's that he plays so well that he forces his way onto the field for 15, 20 snaps. And in those 15, 20 snaps, he's going to have some moments where he looks like a redshirt freshman and some moments where he looks like that guy's going to be an All-American at some point in time. And you make play. It's that 3-yard stuff. It's that they get the sack, or they force a guy to scramble out and he runs right into the arms of Boubacar or Bryce Young or Keon Keeley or something like that. It's they make those difference-making plays where Jason Onye could have a just great game and have 2 tackles and half a tackle for loss. And we're like, dude, watch the tape. He beat that guard all day. You want to know why Drake Bowen had 13 tackles? Watch 47. Watch 0 and watch 7. Now, they combined for a total of 6 tackles between the two of them and 1.5 tackles for loss. That was their production. But they dominated the interior, and that allowed Drake and Kingston and Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed and Madden to just rack up 30-plus tackles in this game as a group. And this team, because your running backs making jump cuts 3.5 yards behind the line of scrimmage because Francis Brew just basically bench pressed the left guard into the backfield. But he didn't make a play. Chris Burgess does that, shakes the guy, tackles him for a 2-yard loss. Armel beats the guard so bad that he's just got a free run on the quarterback like we saw Riley do. I think Caleb Williams still wakes up screaming some nights, just like envisioning number 99 from Notre Dame getting a free run on him from the 2023 game. I think he wakes up in cold sweats like, oh, God, it's just a dream. Thank God we're only playing an NFL team this weekend, and they don't have Riley Mills on that line. I mean, he just was getting free runs because he was killing USC's offensive line that game. But Riley was not consistent that year. Like, I think they can give us flashes of that Riley this year, where when Armel's on, dude, he's on. But when he's off, it's like, okay, you're only getting 10 snaps today. But when you get like, okay, fellas, Armel's feeling it, he's going to play 40 snaps this game because they can't block him. And I think that's what him and Chris can bring to the table, Sean. I don't know that I'm with Onye, with Francis Brew, with Tion. It's like, you just whoop that guy across me for 60 minutes and let those other guys work. They need to do that too, but they're capable of having those plays where, did you see the speed that guy got around on that twist with and got to the quarterback? That's what that means for me. Where with Elijah Hughes going to play his tail off, and he's just, look at that motor. Look how much he battled. But it's not like, did you see him get 3.5 tackles for loss? Right? Like when John Bonner had a great game in 2018, he had 2 tackles and a half tackle for loss. But he just battled his tail off and just kept those guys occupied, and it allowed, Niles – Tavon Coney and Drew Tranquil to just fly to the ball, right? Like that's what a great game from him looked like. When Jerry Tillery had a great game, he had 4 sacks against Stanford. That's the difference. And that's what I think those guys bring to the table. Now, I do think there's some moments where Francis and Tion and Jason can do that, especially Jason and Tion. Because, like I said, when Francis Brew dominates, like if you're thinking Francis Brew is going to lead the team in sacks, I'd say that I don't think you have an understanding of what makes him a really good player. When you want to say how good was Francis Brew today, well, they rushed for 35 yards, and he was a big reason for that. You know what I mean? He only had 2 tackles. He was an all ACC player last year, Sean, and he only had 7 tackles for loss and I think 1 sack all year. His dominant and like 30 tackles. His dominance is I beat that guard so bad that our middle linebacker had 13 tackles. That's how Francis Brew dominates.
Yeah.
I think that's usually how Tion is going to dominate. That's a lot when Jason Onye is going to be dominated, because as good as he was in the last 6 games with the 17 pressures, only 2 of them resulted in a hit or a sack on the quarterback. They're going to be more disruptive, where I think Armel and Chris have the potential to actually make plays when they arrive at the football. And to me, that's the difference.
Look, ultimately, I'm encouraged by this group. I think it is the last position room, development-wise and recruiting-wise, that has to get to that elite level. And we're going to talk about that coming up. But it's a group. It might be a group I'm most excited to watch.
Yeah,
this year. Maybe receiver might if I really thought about it, receiver might be a little bit ahead of defensive tackle, but I'm really excited to watch the defensive tackles play this year.
Here's the question as we wrap this up. Here's the big question. And I'm just going to leave it out there because we don't know the answer. If this group plays its floor, it's just like last year's group, slightly better. That's what I think. I think it's slightly better version of last year's D tackles, which again, guys, were a group that played really good football, held their non-triple option opponents to, I think, like 80-something yards a game last year. Actually, let me do some quick math real quick, just to give some perspective on what the Notre Dame how good the Notre Dame rush defense was last season. Again, they only allowed one opponent last season to go beyond 60 yards. That was Navy. They only allowed 2 opponents to go above 135 yards, Arkansas being the other, and like I said, 50-something of that came on a blown play. But this is a team, Sean, that last year, so let's take away Navy's 206 yards, in 11 games against teams that didn't run the triple option, they gave up 90.5 rushing yards per game. 90.5 rushing yards per game. Trevor and I broke down recently. I know you heard this, Sean, is the last 5 national champions have held teams to 90 yards rushing or less. Right. So so you're there, and those teams didn't play a triple option team. You're kind of there. Now the DNs were good, and the linebackers are excellent, and the secondary is really talented, and all that. But I think their floor is a slightly better version of last year. That's what I think their floor is. Their ceiling, however, is much higher. So the question is going to be, will they simply be an improved version of last year's team unit, or do we see some of those breakouts start to happen? Onye, one of the 2 transfers, or both of the transfers. Does Mookum do it? Does Burgess do it? Does Golden have that kind of, hey, I can help you here? Does Mullins, who raises their level of play to that degree? And that's what we don't know, but that's what's going to be required for them to be just better than a slightly better version of last year. Slightly better version of last year can be part of a championship team, but it's going to take more than that for them to be the drivers of a championship defense. Yeah. And that's the difference for me. And that's the one unknown about this group. So, Sean, as we dive into part, should be 3 of this breakdown, but part 4 of the show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, we're going to talk about defensive tackle from a looking at the future standpoint, and that is recruiting. And it's going to sound a lot like the defensive end breakdown because it begins with this. You just landed an outstanding duo in last season. Elijah Golden, you and I both believe, is a top 100 player with big time upside. I mean, you're talking about a kid who as a junior and senior, Sean, had absolutely monster numbers playing for a really good program in Florida and was I think, first team Max Preps All-American, high school All-American this past season, played for Jared Clark, former Notre Dame player. But you look at his numbers the last 2 years playing at Cardinal Mooney in 26 games, won a state championship as a senior, 26 games. The last 2 years, Elijah Golden had 137 tackles, 68 tackles for loss, 27 sacks, and also had 46 hurries to go with that, according to Max Preps. First team All-State kid, Max Preps All-American. You and I also love the talent. How does that project? Tiki was a really good football player, but they haven't been able to consistently do that. And you're at the point now where there's really, I would argue, only 3 positions on the team where Notre Dame has not been able to establish the ability to stack strong classes in a row under Marcus Freeman. I would argue that it's wide receiver, defensive end, and defensive tackle. They're certainly doing it at linebacker. I mean, since Marcus Freeman arrived, they landed Josh Burnham, Jalen Sneed, and Junior Chillimack in one linebacker class. The next year, they went out and got Drake Bone and Jay Nosbury. The next year, they went out and got Kingston Viliama Asa, Bodie Cahoon, Teddy Rizak. The next year, they went out and got Madden Faramo, Anthony Sack, and now, again, some of these guys have transferred. So, they've been getting at least one dude every year. Last year's class was not quite as good, but I think we both like the potential of Thomas Davis Jr. and Jacoby Clapper showed us some things this spring as an athlete in some certain drills. But it wasn't a great linebacker year nationally. There's a lot of reasons for it, but there's been stretches of really good football recruiting. Same thing at quarterback. I mean, if you're not happy with Gino Gadulli's recruiting at quarterback, then you're never going to be happy. I mean, if you're not happy with what Jaywan Sider did in his first full year as a recruiter, I don't know what your expectations are. Tight end recruiting is great. Hey, you can complain all you want about Joe Rudolph as an offensive line coach, and in some things I'll disagree with you, in some things I'll absolutely agree with you. But you know what? You're not. You know where I'm going to have a problem with you if you could try to tell me that you're not sure if Joe Rudolph can recruit. That's when we're going to have a misunderstanding. You know what I mean, Sean? That's where we're going to have some problems. Yeah. You want to talk about, they just haven't been able to stack DB classes together. You're wrong. They have. DN, D tackle, and receiver, they have not. They have not consistently stacked classes. Now, I think they're on the verge of doing it at wide receiver, and we talked a little bit about that the other day. Last year's class was awesome. I loved last year's class, and I think this year's class has a chance to be very good if they can finish on Julius Jones Jr. So now we get to the D tackle room. You landed an outstanding 1-2 punch last year at defensive end and defensive tackle. I think D end was better. As much as I love Tiki and Elijah Golden, I grade Rodney and Ebenezer even higher. This year, you have a chance to have your best D tackle class in a very, very long time if you can close. So this is the chance for Notre Dame to prove that we can stack classes where it arguably matters most on defense, and that's up front. We talked about the defensive end the other day. They need to be able to follow up Ebenezer and Rodney with Abraham Cisse, Jackson Vaughn, and Aiden O'Neal. Inside, they don't have anybody in the class yet. Nobody's publicly committed yet. But you've got a chance, Sean, to put together an elite group. And we'll get into specific players here in a second. But in Charlie Partridge's first go-round, the one thing I think you're going to have a hard time arguing is we'll see if he can finish. But, man, has he put together an impressive board. Meaning, if you get guys from this group of dudes, you've got some dudes. We'll break down the specifics, but the 4 here that I'm talking about is David Fuller-Runshu, Braden Parks, Marcus Fakatu, Xavier Muhammad. I would argue any 2 of those 4, you meet your needs, let's roll. If you get 3 of those 4, good luck college football for the next 4 years.
You can say that again. And you can start with David Fuller-Runshu, who has his commitment coming up, or his announcement coming up next Friday here in Chicago. I'll be on the scene to witness what hat he picks up. And we all hope that, he's going to pick up a Notre Dame hat. But it just goes back. These 4.
Real quick, Sean, just to let everybody know, the 5 for him is Notre Dame, Miami, Texas Tech, Michigan, and Georgia. Just so that's the 5 he's picking from. But, yeah, keep going, Sean. Yeah. You're rolling.
But there's a common theme here with all 4 of these guys. And I just wonder if Notre Dame, of course, they might have meant to do this because some of these kids had already been on campus previously, but they got all 4 of these kids on campus for the blue and gold game. So don't ever let anybody tell you that the blue and gold game has lost its luster or lost its purpose when it comes to recruiting. Because obviously it hasn't, because it impacted the recruitment of all 4 of these young men moving forward. And we'll get into it. But with Fuller-Runshu, I think for him to come in consecutive weeks, to be there for the scrimmage and then to come right back and to feel like he had to bring his mother, I think it speaks volumes. I shared with you that it ruffled feathers in the recruiting world and in other recruiting rooms at other programs when they saw he came back for a consecutive week with his mom. And so you would think that the arrow is pointing in the right direction for the Fighting Irish when it comes to David Fuller-Runshu as his announcement comes upon us this next Friday. Actually, right around this time, I believe is right around this time next Friday, we'll be finding out if I'm not mistaken. But Coach Partridge has done an incredible job. I think he has a certain level of authenticity to his approach, but this is something else that Brian has shared with me that I think is starting to show itself. And Marcus Freeman is becoming a hell of a closer.
Mm-hmm.
He's becoming a hell of a closer. And the message is the same with each and every one to recruit. I'm telling you, he is being right up front, and he is not allowing anything that is seen by the staff or the recruiting department as, oh, this might be the reason why a guy might choose someone else. He is very much proactive, saying, yo, let me handle this. Whether it's a phone call, a conversation, whether it's directly with the kid, the parents, or representatives. And it's just a great thing to hear. So I'm looking forward to next Friday. Feeling really good about it at this point. And yeah, his counterpart or his workout counterpart at Win Performance.
Let's stay with David for just a second here, Sean, because I want to talk about, like, with each of these guys, kind of, okay, you guys are telling us they're going to commit. You're telling us that they're really good. Why are they important players? And I think that when you look at the group as a forward, and we're watching some David Fuller-Runshu film now, the big thing, Sean, is you've got legit playmakers in this group, and they're different style of players, but you've got 4 difference makers. You got 4 guys that I believe are top 100 recruits in David Fuller-Runshu and Braden Parks and Marcus Fakatu and Xavier Muhammad. And that's why I say we all have our favorites. I want the 2 Chicago guys, or I want Marcus Fakatu or whatever. Like, a lot of people don't know who Xavier Muhammad is. We'll talk about him here in a little bit. That's a ball player right there. Like there are 4 really good football players. And you got to get 2 of them. If you can get 3 of them, that's like just a grand slam home run at that point in time. And I'd like to get 3 of them. I think you can make a case that they need 3 of them when you look at, some of the guys they're going to lose off the roster the next couple of years. But when you look at David Fuller-Runshu, the thing about him is his best football is way in front of him.
Absolutely.
Like, that's why his ranking is very kind of all over the place. When you watch David, there's one outlet that has him as the number 9 player in the country, and another one has him, I think, like in the 70s or 80s, because he's not a finished product yet. But when you watch him play, you see a guy with outstanding ability. You see a guy that brings some versatility to your defense. He can play 3 technique. I don't know that I'm sticking him over the nose today, but by the time he's a freshman in Notre Dame, he'll have some more strength on him. And he's a big, thick upper body kid. He's got really good frame. He's strong. He's got long arms. As you see there, he can get off the block. He can get to the football. but he's a kid that you also can line up as a 5 technique or a 4-eye technique and some 3-man fronts. Notre Dame has talked to him about that. That's kind of been their pitch to him. Like, look, when we're playing multiple fronts, you're a guy that can kick outside and play on the edge and do some things on the edge. You see him do that. But look how fast his hands
that quick swim is crazy. Oh, man.
Like he can – we talk about – I don't know if anybody on the roster right now can be a Riley Mills. He can. Like, this is a young guy that can eventually become with good coaching. Because the thing with him is he needs strong coaching. He needs someone that's going to kind of push him. And that's why I love the fact that he's working with Kerry Neal, because you and I have had some conversations about the workouts. And Kerry Neal's like basically saying, like, I'm going to try to break you in a good way, because he understands I got to push you beyond what you think you're capable of, because you're so talented that you don't understand how much better you can actually be, because you're dominant the way that you are now. And that's the thing when you look at David Fuller-Runshoe is, would I rank him as the number 9 player in the country right now? Probably not, because he's got a lot to work. But when you talk about the upside grade, which is, again, my grading system is different, he's got as much upside as almost any D tackle in the country, if not any D tackle in the country. And that's why he's such an important commit for, like, look at that push pull right there, Sean, on that particular play. This is a 280 pound kid that's getting after the quarterback. And you see plays like this where he comes off the edge. He's got that push pull, bam, real quick. You don't even see it at first. And you're like, okay, once this kid gets even older, even stronger, he's working with Charlie Partridge. And it's not that the St. Patrick coaches aren't coaching him up. It's just you can only learn so much in high school, and that's why college coaches take it to the next degree. But there's a level of, boy, if this kid can put it all together and be more consistent and just understand how good he can be, he can be that Riley Mills type of guy. He can be that Jerry Tillery type of guy. He can be that Stephon Tuitt type of guy, where this guy's truly a difference maker, and he's not just eating up blocks. He's also making double-digit tackle for loss numbers. He has high sack numbers. He's in the 30s and 40s in pressures and those type of things. Like, that's what he's capable of being when he can put it all together. And that's why Notre Dame is after him so hard. And what's interesting is he didn't get offered until Charlie Partridge and the new staff showed up, which still blows my mind. But, different conversation for a different day. But they didn't offer him until what, February? Like February of 2026. So they've had to make up some ground. Now, in fairness, a lot of people got on him late because he had a breakout junior season. But this is a big-time football player. And you talk about must-gets, this is a must-get in the class. There's no question about it.
And it's one of those things, I think, with a kid like this, and we kind of put it on the board, I think about a week back when we found out he was coming back for Blue and Gold weekend. This is a young man with a euphoric rise, quick riser in the recruiting ranks. During the contact period in January, all of a sudden, he's a 5-star, top 25 kid. And you kind of wonder, with a kid like that, is he going to continue to put in the work? Is because this is a kid on multiple occasions that shared with me that Notre Dame was his dream school. Just flat out, Notre Dame's my dream school. Notre Dame's my dream school. And so I can understand, the up and down, the volatility of recruiting, especially after spring visits, is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. It just shifts. This team is your top school. Then you go to the next visit, that team is your top school. It's the way it is now. So reading the tea leaves, especially for Notre Dame, is you just have to be patient. And I shared this with you. I was like, Notre Dame just have to weather the storm. They just have to weather the storm. Don't buy into all of that.
That's why you and I got a good chuckle out of that. He's going to go to Texas Tech. And we're like, he may not go to Notre Dame, but I promise you he ain't going to Texas Tech.
He ain't going to Texas Tech. And it's
that's
just like,
stuff right there.
When you, with him, with his workout counterpart, Braden Parks, at Win Performance, those are kids that you have established such a really good relationship. Other teams are going to come after them, the big dogs, Miami, Ohio State, Texas Tech. They're going to make big-time offers. You have to stick to your guns. And that message that Marcus Freeman is giving to all of these elite guys is the same. Look, man, this is a choice. You have to choose. It's going to be, you have to make the choice. You have to buy in. You got to buy in. Like, you can come here and do great things, but you got to buy in, because this is different, but it's going to set you up for the rest of your life. This is about your life. And it is resonating. The message is absolutely resonating at the end of the day, because on the other end, you're getting the same, I'll call it fluff. You're getting the same fluff. Oh, you're our guy. We can offer you more money, this, that, and the other. But this is how things have changed. 4 or 5 years ago, why would you go there? Who are you going to play with? You're not going to have a chance to win there. Now they're literally saying this. Are you going to get on the field?
Right.
Did you see who they brought in?
That's the negative recruiting that people are using against Notre Dame right
totally
now.
Changed. It's totally
hilarious.
Changed. It's hilarious.
I told somebody at Notre Dame yesterday, I was like, just so you guys know, you are literally target number one for everyone right now. Like, every kid that we talk to, Sean, it's like they're all ganging up on Notre Dame. Like, Texas Tech ain't talking about Miami, and they're not talking about Michigan or Georgia. Georgia's not talking about Texas Tech or they're all negatively recruiting Notre Dame. Now, not every school negatively recruits, but a lot of them do. And Notre Dame is the school that they're all zeroing in on. We've said this, Sean, you and I have said this for years. If Notre Dame starts winning and getting kids from the, especially kids from the South, that they're going, that's the worst case scenario for everybody, because there's just certain things Georgia can't sell that Notre Dame can. And the only way they're going to beat Notre Dame is if a kid just doesn't care about that, which we've seen before. Or, sometimes the kid just doesn't want to go far away from home, and that's fine. I didn't necessarily go. I went to college. The furthest I went to college was like 4.5 hours away, and I transferred to a school that was only 2.5 hours away. It wasn't like I went to school in LA. I liked being kind of close to my parents. I get that. But it is hilarious watching the things that these schools say. It used to be like, you're not going to go to the NFL if you go to Notre Dame. Like, they haven't produced a defensive lineman since such and such. They haven't produced this. They don't say that to kids now. Now it's like, you're not going to play. Like, you now loaded. I mean, dude, you're going to come here and play as a freshman. You're not going to get on the field there. That's literally the negative recruiting we're seeing from schools now. You're not going to get on the field there.
Yeah.
Like, do you see how many guys are going to be in front of you? You can't play there. And I freaking love that. And it's just, it's hilarious to see how much that has become. And if they can hit on this defensive line class, Sean, and it's going to be even more of that on 28. Let's dive into the next kid from Chicago, because I think one of the unique things from Notre Dame in this class and in the 28 class is at some positions where they haven't been able to find big-time players at some key positions. In the North, there have been the last couple of years. They got a 5-star safety last year from Maryland and a 5-star from Pennsylvania and a 5-star corner from Maryland. In this class, they're trying to get a 5-star D tackle and another top 100 D tackle from Chicago. Next year, there's 2 5-star DNs in Chicago. You look at some of the talent. There's just a lot more high-level talent at receiver, DB, linebacker, D-line in the North, and Notre Dame's got to take advantage, especially on the D-line the next 2 years. And one of those guys is Braden Parks, who's from Brother Rice in Chicago. This is a guy that Notre Dame's been on for a long time, Sean, and right now it's really a Notre Dame-Oregon battle with Ohio State charging in. But this is a guy that I think Notre Dame really needs to get, and because he's a little bit different than the other 3 D tackles, and you see the production there. Braden's more of that natural big body. Braden shows up at Notre Dame day one big enough and strong enough to play. And you see a 6'3", 300-pound kid, 295 to 300, depending on who's listening, that's quick, that can make plays. There's a highlight later here that I don't know we'll get to, because this is literally a 14.5-minute highlight tape where he jumps over 2 linemen to pick off a screen pass. You remember that play, Sean? Like, where he literally reads the screen, and then the ball's in the air, and he jumps over 2 offensive linemen and like mosses them and takes the screen away. Yeah. That's what Braden Parks can do. And so now I think with the look, that's a grown man play right there. He just one arms and throws the guard on the play. He doesn't get as much attention from fans because he's not ranked high. But Sean and I will just tell you guys, Sean's seen him live. I've broken down the film. The rankings are wrong. This is a top 100 football player. This is a big-time player that, in my opinion, Notre Dame really needs to get. Now, We've said get 2 of the 4 and you're good. So there's any combination of the 2 that you need to get. But I just think this is one, Sean, that he can do some different things. I mean, just look at him just absolutely collapse the backfield. Who's going to get to the quarterback first, me or Cam McGee? That's basically kind of what it came down to a lot last year. And there's some sacks that Cam McGee got that should give an assist to Braden Parks because he forced the guy out right into Cam McGee's arms. But this is a dominant football player that he's going to be more of a run defender in college than he is a pass rusher compared to high school, but still is going to bring some collapse the pocket ability as a pass rusher as well. And this is just a big time football player that I think it's important to get. Depending on how you talk to, I think there is some concern that Oregon is a legit player here. So I think Notre Dame still has some work to do here, but they're going to have to close the deal here. I just love that play right there, Sean. They're going to have to work hard to close the deal here, Sean. This is a player you really need to get, in my opinion. Getting him back for a second time this spring was impactful, but there's some closing to do on this one. And I do think, after talking to you, Sean, we believe this is Sean's intel, and I agree with him based on what I do think he's going to decide sooner rather than later, but he has not made a decision. Notre Dame's got to close this one out. There's finishing to do here. This is the one. I think this is the play, Sean, where he literally reads the screen and watch him, jumps over 2 linemen to take the football. I freaking love that play.
Yeah, you talking about this young man. You talk about the connections, and this is kind of similar to David Fulleron's show. They both have strong connections to Notre Dame. Surrounded by Notre Dame, Brother Rice is a huge contingency of Notre Dame fans that are alums there. So very similar. The fit is there. But like you said, Oregon is a contender. But Oregon is one of those schools quietly that has really done a good job developing defensive linemen the last 2 or 3 years and having really good defensive line play the last 2 or 3 years. So for me, that is the pedigree. I think there was a crack in the door with Al Washington going to the NFL because that was the strong relationship. And as I said this before, I was at the game standing on the sideline. A staffer walked up to me and said, yo, the Notre Dame coach was just here the other day, and he told us he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that he gets Braden Parks. So there's no way Braden Parks, he's always been a priority for Notre Dame.
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
And so just him coming back shows that there is an interest and something is resonating between him, his family, and Coach Partridge. I think when you see kids come back like that, because the first time they meet them during the spring, it's kind of like, okay, let's see. And then that second time is like, all right, let me really go in and dive deep because I'm drawn in now. Like Coach has me. And I think that bodes well for Notre Dame. Like you said, it's more work to do without question. I'll just give you this tidbit, and I want to make sure I say it in a certain way because I don't want you mentioned all the great defensive linemen over the next 2 years. Oh, you forgot to mention big boy from Mount Carmel next year, Caleb Tucker as well.
Yeah, Caleb Tucker, yeah.
But
big does not properly describe Caleb Tucker.
Monstrous, yes.
Braden Parks is big. Caleb Tucker's not. Man. He's not from this planet.
Kerry Neal trains the vast majority of the top guys on defensive line in the city of Chicago. He's flat out told me, Sean, he's the best defensive lineman in the state, and I don't think it's particularly close. That's from Kerry Neal.
Yeah. So as far as like who's the best player right now, I agree
right
with that
now,
completely.
Right now. He's like, it's not
agree
close.
With that completely.
So that goes to your point of the fanfare around him because of the rankings or whatever. But if you just look at the technical aspect of the position, how he plays, the quickness, the size, and everything that he does, and I think your projection to the next level is pretty much right. I don't know if you get the same pass rush value going to college, but what you're going to get is the same quickness, the intelligence, the leadership, and he's used to playing next to. He's played next to King Liggins
Oh,
for three
who you
for
and I
3
both
years.
liked. We liked him.
So
like
he
it
knows
worked out well for Notre Dame, Sean, the two they got. But if they would have taken King Liggins, neither one of us would have had any problem with that.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. So you're talking about a kid that plays in the toughest division in all of the state of Illinois, toughest conference. Each and every game is a
I would say
battle.
it's one of the best in the up north. I mean, it's like that. It's like with the DC Catholic League. It's like there's the Pittsburgh and Philly have some strong football. I would argue it's in the conversation for the toughest league in the north.
Yeah, I would agree. So you're talking about this battle here could end soon. It might. There is a chance that it goes into the officials. There's a chance.
The chance, but
it's a chance.
I think it's going to end sooner. But
a chance it goes into the officials. But I just think my purview on this is it's a lot. Notre Dame built up enough to weather the other big programs like Ohio State and Oregon coming on, and just getting to a point now that everything settles after the spring and kids get to really think about like what it is that they always wanted and what they really want to do. And like you said, Notre Dame just needs to go ahead and, like I said, Marcus Freeman has been a closer. He's flat out been a closer, and they just have to close. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about another young man. I know this is a fan favorite. We're going to talk about Marcus Fakatu. Another very, very talented player, Sean. And he's more in the David Fuller-Runshoe category as far as how he's being recruited. You know, they've sold on him. Hey, you're going to play some end. You're going to play some 3 technique. You're going to do a little bit of everything. You're not a pure end. He thinks he's a defensive end. That's the concern right now. And there's teams that are lying to this young man and trying to tell him that he's a defensive end. He's not. He can be a 3-4 end, and he can play defensive end from like 4-eye like he is right there, and can play like a 5, and he can kind of be that big power end like in an old school. Like he'd have been great at Georgia's old 3-4 defense. Where Bama's old 3-4 defense, and which is the same thing because Kirby took it to Georgia. But he's more of a big guy. He's a guy that needs to be a 3 technique that can also bump out. Very talented player, top 50 national player in my opinion. A guy that also reclassified to 2027. He was originally a 2028 recruit. I believe if Al Washington had not have left Notre Dame, I think he commits to Notre Dame. I just think that relationship is very strong. And this is one where, as you mentioned, that window opened up some opportunities for other teams to jump in. Now, Notre Dame has worked hard to get back in there, and I do think Notre Dame is a legitimate player. I think anyone trying to pretend they have a read on what Marcus Fakatu is going to do is out of their minds. Because number one is there's not a kid on this board who's gone back and forth between which schools he likes more than there's nobody that I would say there's more of. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Sean, where we were being told by the recruiting services and all their super reliable and not clickbaity at all conversations that Marcus Fakatu's leader was Michigan, and there were crystal balls going in or whatever they do, projections or whatever the predictions they do it on 3 are to Michigan. And then when he releases his top 5 on May 4th, Michigan's nowhere to be seen. I mean, so like 1 week it's Oregon's the team to beat. The next week Notre Dame's the team to beat. The next week Ohio State's the team to beat. And he just says a lot of things that make you say like, this one's going to be hard to read. Like somebody sent me an article. I don't know if Kyle Kelly did it or if it was from Oregon. Like he did a bunch of interviews and somebody sent me a clip of it, screenshot of it. And it was a free article, but it was like something like, whatever school basically stays on me the longest essentially is going to, like some schools have fallen off. And I'm like, these are some strange comments. Like they need to like have him stop like doing interviews with everyone on the planet because he's a young kid and he just says things that I think people use
that part to
kind of create drama and clicks.
And he's very accessible. I'll add that in. There are a lot of recruits. Yep. He loves to talk.
Yeah,
man, he's very
giving
gracious
you his
young man.
Opinion.
Giving you his honest opinion, absolutely.
But his opinion changes a lot because that's what recruiting does. And so people take those things and they turn it into stories to try to now. I'm not saying that about Kyle Kelly because Sean, you and I, know that we both think very highly of Kyle Kelly and the job he does. And but I'm referring to like other people, and they're going to take the things he says and like, hey, let's spin this and get what we can out of it. And then it's like people are like, this kid's pretty flaky. No, he's a 16, 17-year-old who's being wooed by the best teams in the country. And guess what? Imagine this crazy idea. So some weeks he likes Oregon the most. Some weeks he likes Notre Dame the most. Some weeks he likes Ohio State the most or Georgia the most because those are really good programs. You know, I think Texas is one of his 5 finalists. And so, of course, he's kind of back and forth. And that's just the reality that you're going to have to understand with Marcus Fakatu is I don't think he's close to making a decision. So I think he's in a situation where he is still back and forth and going back and forth. And Notre Dame's just got to, if they want him, they've just got to stay the course. Just relax, stay the course, keep building that relationship. I think what Marcus wants more than anything is consistency. Who's going to be consistent? And if you know the family he comes from and the people around him, I think you greater understand what he means when he says, I want to know who's going to stay on me the longest. Like it very much comes across like I want the love. Who's going to, but if you actually know him at all, and Sean, you do, so that's what I'm saying is because I think you'll be able to back me here because we've talked about this. It's not that as much as it's like, I want to go somewhere where that coach is going to care about me and want to develop me on and off the field. But if a coach can't even stay on me in recruiting because, you know, I'm supposedly trending somewhere else, then that's not a guy that's in it for the long. That's what I think Marcus means when he says, but it comes across because he's young as, oh, this guy just wants to be spoiled and pampered and he wants everybody to love him and that kind of thing. Who's going to love me the most? That's how it comes across. If you don't know him, that's how it comes across. And that's why I say if to his advisors, like, let's make him a little less accessible. You know what I mean? Like, you know, find some people that, you know, that you trust and that, you know, do right by him and maybe take a couple steps back now that unofficials are over and start planning for officials. But it is what it is. Moral of the story is this is a very talented offensive lineman whose recruitment is wide open. Right now, Ohio State has the edge. How do I know that? Because he said so. But I also know, talking to some other people, that he said some things that make Notre Dame think they've got a legitimate shot at him. And Georgia thinks they have a legitimate shot at him. And you know, there's just been there's this different back and forth about, you know, Michigan thought they were going to get him at one point in time. So just relax, let it play out, and see how you go. Because the reality is he's the kind of guy, actually I'd say all these guys are, I don't think you drop any of them because somebody committed. You get one or two, fine. We've got one or two, we still want him. You know, and that's where I think you are. Now, I also would say, I don't know if there's anybody on this list that I'm waiting for either. Like, if 3 other guys want to commit, I'm not waiting on the 4th, whoever that might be. That's how good I think this group is, Sean. But, you know, Notre Dame's in it for Marcus. It's just his is the one that I'm very confident is going to take a while. And it's definitely going to go into officials. Like, I could see Braden. I could see David Fuller-Runchu, obviously Will. I could see Xavier Muhammad all kind of getting to the point where they're like, I know where I want to go. I'm ready. Now, I think Xavier Muhammad plans to take officials, and I think, like you said, Braden Parks is considering it. But when it comes to Marcus, like, there's no doubt. I think he's going to be a post-officials decision maker.
Yeah, I think that's something that we spoke after the blue and gold game. And he said he wants it to – this is why I think it's a 2-team race right now. I really do. And that going back and forth, I think one day he wakes up and he feels like it's one team. And I think the other day he wakes up.
Do you think it's like Ohio State and Notre Dame?
Yeah.
I agree.
I really do. And I think that, like you said, this wouldn't even be a conversation if not for the coaching change that took place. But I think they made it, I don't want to say they made it difficult, you know, because they love Notre Dame and they had the relationship with Al Washington. But I think Coach Partridge had to earn their trust. You know, I'm not going to say they made it difficult for him because I don't think that's the type of people his family are. But I think, you know, Coach Partridge had to earn their trust. And I think and Coach Partridge post blue and gold has been relentless. that right there
Mhm.
is what people have picked up on from him in recent conversations. I spoke to him over the weekend, and he just talked about like how that relationship continues to get stronger even after the blue and gold game. And I asked him flat out, like, what message during this process, what message stood out for you concerning Notre Dame? And he said, choose hard.
Mhm.
He said, choose hard. He said, that's the message that resonates for me. He's like, they believe it's the best place for me and the best place for me to succeed. And it's bigger than football. And as long as I'm willing to grind and put in the work, I'm going to reap the benefits from it. So Notre Dame is going to, like you said, I think Notre Dame is at a place now where I don't know if greed is the right word or just audacious in how they're going about doing things. Because remember now, he spent a considerable, or not because he spent the majority of his time at Blue and Gold with another kid that just reclassified to the 27 class in defensive end, Jackson Vaughn, who's another 5-star kid. So we're talking about, reclassification, and this is back end. This might be something we could just to let you know. It's very interesting that Notre Dame is targeting 2 positions in particular, or these are the 2 main positions where we are seeing a lot of reclassification: defensive line and quarterback, which happen to be the 2 highest NIL slots in recruiting as well. That's just very interesting to me that a lot of kids are choosing to reclassify those 2 positions. But I think it benefits Notre Dame to be in on both of these kids. And he is a kid, like you said, he wants to make a decision right after his visits. He's like, soon after my official visits, it's like, dude, you're not going to see anything that's going to just make a major shift. And I don't think anything's going to happen
for
in
that
that
final piece to the puzzle, that final bit of information,
yes,
that final feeling that you have that says, okay, I'm torn, but come out of the business. Like you hear this from kids that pick Notre Dame and pick other places. It's like, I liked these 2 schools, or I like these 3 schools, but man, when I went on the officials, that was home.
Yeah.
That like, it clicked.
Yeah.
Some kids feel that way sooner. Lathan Wissington felt that literally the minute he got done.
The minute he got to Notre Dame,
like, and it's just like there's nothing else.
That's nothing.
There's one more guy on the board.
Just talk about they did Jack from both sides. Both sides. Jackson Vaughn told me, Marcus Foxy told me, they did discuss playing together.
Yeah. Oh, that's helping.
So that's helping. There are a lot of pros stacking up
on
for Notre Dame.
On the D line, Sean. Exactly. On the D line, big time players want to play with other big time D linemen because they understand if I got a dog across from me or inside of me, you can't double team me.
Yeah.
Or if you do, my dude's going to eat. Like there is that desire to play together. So we'll see kind of how it goes. There's one more defensive lineman on the board that I don't know if like it is obviously not as well known as the others because he's new on the board. He just got offered in April, and we're talking about Xavier Muhammad from Notre Dame. And this is a young man that Notre Dame got on late, but they have made great progress with. I don't know if there was a defensive lineman that visited in April who was more raving about the Notre Dame experience than Xavier was, and his mother was. Notre Dame made a great move here. He's more of a defensive end in high school. I think he projects as a defensive tackle. I think that's where Notre Dame kind of sees him. But you can see the athleticism, Sean. I mean, he's playing tight end right there in high school for South Houston in Texas. He's ranked as a top 100 recruit by Rivals on 3. They have him as number 88 player in the country. He's ranked number 132 by ESPN, number 138 by 247. I think he's a top 100 player, Sean. I think he's a guy that has a little bit of Khalid Kareem to him, where he's the one big T tackle that they have that I actually think could play defensive end. If you have like a big end Viper, like in the old, remember when they had the big end and the Viper and they'd flip sides? The big end was always the big end. The Viper was the Viper. I think Xavier has some of that to him. He could do that. And then, or he moves inside and he's a really quick, twitchy, disruptive 3 technique. Like athletically, he might be the most him and Folarunshu, to me, are the most explosive athletes that they're recruiting for that 3 technique, big end kind of position. He's long. He's a kid that I think at one point in time he was looking heavily at Stanford. He might still be. I think he might actually be taking an official to Stanford. Let me look real quick. But Stanford was really high on his board at one point in time. He's got an official visit scheduled to Stanford. So I think that tells you a little bit of something about where he's at. I do believe he's going to take an official to Notre Dame. I just don't know that it's been announced yet. But he's an intriguing player, Sean. And even though he's not on the same list, like he's not on the same, like he hasn't been a Notre Dame target for as long. If they ended up getting him as one of their 2 to 3 D tackles, I'm thrilled because this kid's a really good football player. And the reason I bring up the Stanford thing is that part of the reason he clicked with Notre Dame, that's really impressive play right there. But part of the reason he clicked with Notre Dame so well is this is a young man who himself and his family, the academic piece is very important to him. And he's a lot like Jackson Coleman. You know, we talked about how Jackson Coleman was leaning towards Oregon until Notre Dame got involved because he wants to play at a big-time program, but he also wants to get a big-time degree. And there's certain schools that provide it. I think that's why Michigan has been a school that has resonated with him since they've gotten on him, because there is a much stronger academic pull there than like Houston or TCU, 2 other schools he's looking at, you know? And so is Notre Dame pushing for him? I think there's still some things I'm trying to learn about where he stands with Notre Dame. Not that they aren't looking at him. I just don't want to tell you guys one thing when I haven't had that confirmed with me. The conversations I have had, I do believe Notre Dame likes him quite a bit. It's just, again, they just got on him a little bit later. But this is a really good football player, Sean, that to me is just as much of a you take him. You don't wait for anyone else if Xavier Muhammad wants to come. That's the kind of player I think he is.
And you talk about, just to let you know, he was with Jackson Vaughn, but one of his good friends from the Houston area in the 28 class, 5-star wide receiver Jalen Adai was with him as well. And they Xavier Muhammad and Jalen Adai spent the majority of the time together. I'm sorry, I was mixing up Marcus Fogatu and Jackson Vaughn. But Jalen Adai and Xavier Muhammad are great friends. Charlie Partridge was in his home last night. And they posted the pictures. As you said, his mom was donning a Notre Dame hat. I asked him about that. I was like, yo, I saw your mom wearing a Notre Dame hat. He said, sent back, yes, sir, with the exclamation mark. So lets you know she's
they just
excited.
Did an in-home visit with him.
Yeah, just last night. So in talking to him about last night, how it went, I'll just share a couple of things that he said that I thought really stood out. He said the visit went great. And it was great being able to spend time with Coach and get to know more about him personally, and made the visit feel even more genuine. He was referring to the visit at the Blue and Gold game. It made it feel even more genuine, and it showed how strong the relationship is becoming. So this goes back to the negative recruiting, that this is a kid that a big time program like Notre Dame jumps on him, and schools are, kind of telling him like, yo, are they really interested in you, or are they just, kind of using you because they might not get somebody else? And I think what Charlie Partridge is showing him and has shown him is that, yes, we want you. You're a priority. And so I flat out asked him, I said, yo, Coach Partridge, I saw you sitting there with Coach Partridge and on his iPad. He said, yeah. I said, what was he showing you? He said he showed me a developmental plan for every year at Notre Dame, from my freshman year all the way to my senior year.
There's a picture of him with the iPad going over.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, that's why I asked him. What was Coach showing you? And he said he was showing me, year by year, the plan that they have for me. And he was like, that really made an impact for me to let me know that they're really serious about me. Right. So his OV is June 12th. He'll be there for the big June 12th.
Okay, so he has set that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because they're only doing officials for 2 weekends. They're 12th and the 19th.
12th and the 19th.
That they're doing that.
Yeah. So right now.
So that means he's basically moving the TCU official, because that was originally going to be that weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. So that lets you know when kids start making moves like that, moving other teams, that lets you know that they're prioritizing that particular program. He feels like Notre Dame is prioritizing him, and he's prioritizing them in his recruitment. So, like you said, he's being recruited to play they're telling him they want him to play the 3 and the 5. So the same versatility with Fakatu.
Yep.
You know, we see
and they've said the same thing to Fuller-Runshu too. Like, they want 2 of those guys in this class. They'd take 2 of those guys in this class. And then Braden Parks is like that. He's that you're an inside guy. And Braden Parks isn't talking to Notre Dame about, can I play on the edge? Like, he knows where his bread is buttered. And that's why I think he's such an important recruit, because he does bring that different skill set. Here's the deal, Sean. You got to get 2 of these 4. Would they take 3 of these 4? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Like, they're not turning anybody down. I think the only way they turn someone down is if they get 3, and then, like, I don't know that you can make it work with 70 linemen. Maybe if you miss on one of the ends, maybe you then just bring in the 4th and just say, hey, we're going to give you a shot at edge. But I don't think all 4 would want to play together necessarily like that. Now we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, I don't mind competing, but this is stupid. But if you can get 3 of the 4, Notre Dame would absolutely take 3 of the 4. But you got to get 2. You get 2 home run stacking classes. Sean and I we're excited. We're jamming out here. But you get 3, and that's just like, okay, now you're just rubbing it in. That's where Notre Dame is at now, Sean. And if for any Notre Dame fans that are wondering if Notre Dame is going to compete in NIL, you don't sign big time defensive line classes if you're not willing to spend money. But the big key is that I think makes these 4 players unique is, do any of them, Sean, you've talked to all 4 of these kids. They're all 4 of, on your recruiting list of the guys you speak to. Have you had, and look, let's be honest. There are guys you and I talk to, and we will talk privately and be like, I don't know if that kid's a Notre Dame fit. Like, that kid is going to be a fish out of water at Notre Dame. Not geographically, but just like, that kid doesn't value the things you need to value to be successful at Notre Dame on and off the field. The thing I love about this group is I don't question. I mean, that's a given for all 4 of them. Like, they're all 4 just great fits at Notre Dame. And I think that's important. And that's why they're all on the board, is because of that. They've found, like, they're elite guys. Cisse's a 5-star. Jackson Vaughn's a top 50 player, in my opinion. Fakatu, but they're all really good players, but they are players that continue to destroy the myth that you and I have talked about, that you've got to lower your standards to get big-time players, especially defensive linemen, especially those ones from the South, that kind of stuff. No, you don't. You just got to go find Taker Muhammad. You just got to find Marcus Fox. You just got to find Braden Parks and Abraham Cisse and Jackson Vaughn and Aiden O'Neal and who am I leaving out? David Fuller-Runshu. I think I might be leaving him out. They're all kids that fit at Notre Dame. You just got to land them. You got to have a good enough product and the right kind of staff to say we're going to get them. And right now Notre Dame has a staff that's got you in the game with all of them. Now, Sean, it's about closing. It's closing time. And that's going to be determined by what Charlie Partridge can do. It's going to be determined by what Mike Martin can do. And it's going to be determined by what, obviously, at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman is going to play a big role in that as well. Absolutely. So the board is great, Sean. The board is there for Notre Dame to have a truly elite gap closing, class. But you've only got 1 on the board so far, Aiden O'Neal at defensive end. So there's a lot of work to be done, but they've got an opportunity, if they can do well this next month and a half, to really put something special together on the D-line.
Yeah. And it's funny because this kind of reverts back to the conversation around expansion and talking about the Marcus Freeman being the case study of having 2 totally different off seasons the last 2 years. And it's so funny because coming out of that, we were worried about the time. We were worried about the departure of Chad Bowden going to USC. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame went on a roll.
Took a while.
During the spring, they went on a roll. And
early April when they get
right?
And Rodney, and then they were cruising.
And I want to say it was just a couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking, and we were like, yo, this time last year, they had got on a roll. Like, man, is it going to happen? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, things started to pick up. So that just goes to show you they had more time this offseason, but the dominoes started falling a little bit later than the previous season when they didn't have as much time, but they were coming off winning, like you said. So there are multiple ways that you can make an impact. The biggest way is by winning. If you win, you're going to resonate with kids. That resonates with kids. And then I just want to say Marcus Freeman is very much an old school coach. Like you can look at the, photo shoots and all of that. He's a hard-nosed old school coach. And the difference between him and predecessors, just not to isolate one, but predecessors that were sandwiched in between him and Lou Holtz, is that they have made Notre Dame relatable in their time. From the first press conference with Lou Holtz, that's what he talked about. What this university is special. That's what he put it out front. Marcus Freeman with these recruits, he's putting Notre Dame out front. We're different. This is a special place. This is what the parents are feeling that is resonating with the kids. You are great when you can make whatever it is that you have to present relatable to the consumer or to the audience or to the students or to the kids. Marcus Freeman is making he's not changing the tradition. He's not changing the standard. No, I'm making what Notre Dame is relatable to these young men, right? Because most people would tell you young men that play the game of football can't relate to Notre Dame. They can't relate to being true student athletes. They can't relate to having to live on campus in dorm. They can't relate to that. And that's being disproven right before your very eyes. The kids are letting you know that's not true. You don't have to believe us. You don't have to believe the recruiting analysts. Tried to tell you that for years. Oh, Notre Dame can never recruit five-star kids. Five-star kids would never want to go to Notre Dame. Well, they were lying. All it took was someone that can make Notre Dame relatable to the young people.
And work.
That part.
Here's what it all comes down to, right? I mean, there's the relatable thing and all that, but here's the final piece of the puzzle is you have a coach and a coaching staff that don't view Notre Dame as a hindrance to getting players.
That part.
They don't have to explain away Notre Dame. They don't have to justify. Well, they view it as a strength. It is, yes, it is harder here. Yeah. And that's going to make you better. Lou Holtz never pretended it wasn't harder at Notre Dame. He never pretended his players had a tougher week. He used it to his advantage. He convinced them psychologically that they were going to be better football players because those other dudes weren't going to class. They believed that. And there's some truth to it. And Brian Kelly always uses it as a crutch. Marcus Freeman uses it the same way Lou Holtz did. These things aren't crutches. These things aren't stumbling blocks. These things are what make us unique. Yeah. They're what make us different.
Mm-hmm.
And he sells that. And that's why one of the many reasons that on top of just being a genuinely better human being of why Marcus Freeman is better than his predecessor when it comes to recruiting. He works at it. He's a genuinely likable person and not someone who just makes you feel like you just spent 20 minutes at a campaign rally with some politician. And he actually believes in the place that he's trying to sell as opposed to I make the place I'm trying to sell.
Yeah.
And, and I've got to use the place that I sell as somehow I got to convince people that, we win in spite of this.
Yeah.
So that's what you're like. Well, we did. Thank you, Chris Galloway. Just stopped in. Appreciate your super sticker, my man. Really appreciate that. Well, Sean, that's going to do it for today's show.
Can I share something with you?
I was going to say 3 hours and 13 minutes might be the shortest show that we've ever done. But if you're about to say something, we might be here for a little bit.
This is funny,
brother.
That it's all boy Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. It's almost intimidating because I was actually talking to Cam McDaniel and Malik, and Cam was like, Malik, I don't even know if we could get recruited by this staff. It's like, I don't even know if we would get recruited by this staff. Like, he's like, thank God we went to Notre Dame when we went because this staff is doing such an incredible job. I don't know if guys like us, and Malik was like, yeah, the prototype. I'm not Geno's prototype for quarterback as far as size. But just hearing them kind of look at what's taking place, and they won in Notre Dame. It's like they played on good teams in Notre Dame. For them to look at where it is now and just kind of see themselves in that bubble and say, man, this is a different level. I don't even know if we would have gotten a call, from this staff, the way they're recruiting.
The thing with Malik would be is it depends on, because Malik came from an offense that lined him up under center and they ran the option and they did all those things. And if he was playing in the same offense as he was 13, 14 years ago, then he probably isn't being targeted by this staff. But I do believe if Malik played in a more modern offense, I do think they would have looked at him, because like they just seen, no, he's not as tall, but he's got a cannon for an arm. He's athletic. He's got leadership. I think Malik's problem, and it was really the thing that slowed him down early on at Notre Dame, was he came from an offense that was stuck in the 80s, and he had to learn how to drop back, how to do a shotgun snap. There's a lot of things he had to learn that he really didn't do in high school. I don't know if he's playing in that kind of offense a decade later. And that would be the thing that I would say to defend Malik. But no, coming out of high school, if like it's the exact same player in the exact same offense, maybe not. But if Malik would have played in more of a pro-style offense, I think that would have helped him be more ready to thrive and would have made him a guy that Notre Dame would have looked at more. So that's my takeaways. But there's a lot of kids that were good players back in that day that you're correct, Sean. They may have still been recruited by Notre Dame, but instead of being the best guy on the recruiting class, they're like second, third, or fourth.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
That shows you the difference. Yep.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate y'all being a part of this, of the Irish Breakdown podcast today. It's a lot of fun. Sean, I'll be back on Monday. Actually, I'm gonna step up. It's my birthday on Monday, so we're gonna be doing a show on my birthday. So if y'all want to get me a birthday gift, here's what you do. Sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That can be your gift to me. And what's great about that as a birthday gift, Sean? It's also a birthday gift to the person who buys the membership, because you're getting some awesome stuff out of it as well. So we've got a couple intel articles on the board that are kind of like where things stand. Here's the must gets and where do they stand with them. So where things are trending with different players. And to show you how quickly things go, I didn't have Olabola on my offensive one. I had to add him after the fact because the intel moves quick, man. But you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That is the best way to support us. We have monthly memberships that are $6.99 a month. We also have annual memberships at $69.99 a month. If you want to support us beyond just that, you can also sign up for one of the booster clubs. If you sign up for the Shamrock or Blue Club, you get an IB Club mug. So it's like the IB mug that I have, but it says club on it and only goes to club members. If you sign up for the Gold Club, you get an IB Club mug and an IB Gold Club t-shirt. And it's just your way to support us and show that you're thanks for what we're doing. For all the moms out there, I hope you all have an amazing Mother's Day. For all the sons out there, make sure your mother knows how much you appreciate her and the role she played in the man you have become. Oh, and if you are a father, make sure you take good care of that sweet lady that is the mother to your children. So either way, I've said before, Sean, I do believe that is something I have always said. I would not be the man I am today had I not been raised by the mother that I was raised by. And I know that you and I have shared that sentiment together. Very much the men we are today is because of the strong mothers that you and I had at home. And I know I certainly appreciate mine. I know you appreciate yours. And to all the other mothers out there, have an amazing Mother's Day. And we'll see you all here very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.